Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Jim Cornette Experience. Today, before we discuss AEW's bogus projectile blood spewing segment, we're going to dive into the viewer mailbag, and we're also going to talk about how wrestlers made money before the billionaires. All that and so much more today, and joining me for this, and the other thing.
Yeah, joining me for that.
Hi. Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard podcast network, Mr. Co-host to you. If you're losing blood, he'll tell you when you're 2 quarts low. Be great, Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. I never know the exact speed and what exactly you're going to say, so I timed it wrong. But we're going to have a good show today, right on time.
Apparently, I never know what I'm going to say either. I couldn't get that out. I've had a horrible shock this morning, but you know, 2 quarts low, you remember that, don't you? Let me know when she's 2 quarts low. You don't listen to me anymore. I told that story as recently as 5 to 7 years ago.
It's an old story, and I remember that line, and I don't remember any other part of the story.
This young lady fan in the Smoky Mountain wrestling area just became enamored of primetime Brian Lee. And she started going to the mat. I can't remember. She's from the Knoxville area, but she was going to all the spot shows and everything. And she'd bring him cards and flowers and things. And there was, as far as I'm aware, there was nothing going on. The whole visual thing didn't match up, right? There was nothing going on, but she loved Brian Lee. As many of the fans back then did love the baby faces. But she got then more enamored of and found his home number. He was living in Nashville. He was married at the time, right? He'd come out to Knoxville for the weekends. Well, his wife can't see, the demeanor of this young lady or her appearance or the overall. She can't eyeball it on the phone. This girl starts calling for Brian on the phone. So, of course, his wife is going, hey, who's Ethel Lipschitz calling for you, right? So finally, it got so far as Brian was sitting at home in Nashville one night with his wife, and the phone rings. This girl had some kind of medical issue and had some type of bleeding. I don't think she was cut by a chainsaw or whatever the fuck. But in the emergency call from the hospital, instead of her having them call like family member or whatever, apparently she had a call Brian Lee, let him know I'm bleeding. So the phone rings and his wife answers it, and it's the hospital calling about Ethel Lipschitz. This sounds like a goddamn W.C. Fields routine. Why is the maternity hospital calling you? And Brian Lee grabs the phone and says, so she's losing blood? And they said, yes. He said, let me know when the bitch is 2 quarts low. And hung up the phone. I think she recovered.
Yeah, that's the next question. Did she recover?
Yeah, I think she was fine. I think she was looking for possibly an excuse to call Brian Lee's house and get some sympathy. But anyway, I had a horrible experience this morning. Just not even this morning, just minutes before we have been scheduled to do this fine program today. And do you have the cicadas, as they call them? But Mama Cornette always called them the locusts. The locusts are back, as in plague of locusts. And so that's what I call them. You've got the locusts, or do you up there?
We do. I haven't heard them right now. I don't think they're here this time of year, but
they stepped out for a minute, but did they leave a sign? We'll be back at 2:00 or. You heard, you haven't had it like because down here, this is the locust belt, apparently. And I didn't play for you. I've let you hear what it sounded like when I was on the phone with you here last week or whatever. We go outside. It sounds like the soundtrack to Them, the giant radioactive ant movie from 1953. You will agree they're very loud, right? You've heard this.
Well, I heard them. You have loud locusts. I didn't say I didn't have them. I said I don't have the cicadas right now. They're not out. They're not buzzing. They're not making noise. I'd be complaining if they were.
Well, but no, they make noise constantly unless it's raining or at night. If the sun is shining, If it's daytime, they're making noise. But you would think, and this is what I thought, and I've been proven wrong, Brian. Mark this date down. I thought the reason why those fucking things were so loud is because they're in all the trees and there's millions of them, right? And I'm figuring, each one goes, and then, it's magnified by a million times. That's why it sounds like a science fiction movie. Oh, no. Au contraire, mon frere. Talk to one of these son of a bitches individually. I double dog dare you. I was sitting on the couch in the TV room, as I said just a little while ago, and I had I got some viewer mail. Here are my papers. Rustling. I got all of my viewer mail and my notes together and everything. And I just set the notepad down and leaned back. And one of these son of a bitches has ridden in on my shirt or whatever the fuck and had sat down right on the couch next to me and let out. It sounded like a smoke detector. God damn it. I jumped up off the fucking couch and turned around almost because I had to piss anyway because I'd taken my morning pill and almost pissed myself. And I turned around and there's this bug-eyed, pie-faced, fucking giant, red-headed, winged goddamn thing. I said, you son of a bitch. And I grabbed a handful of Kleenex, right? And I'm going to snatch the thing, right? And neutralize the threat. And as I grab it with that Kleenex and I'm going to smother it, it yelled, it screamed at me. I could feel it vibrating in my fucking hand, in my grasp, Brian. It sounded like goddamn, it was screaming, I tell you. And then I'm running like I've got cow shit in my hand, holding it out, running to the garage to throw it in the garage trash. Those son of a bitches are loud. Have you ever talked to a locust individually?
Again, I've never had this
cicada?
No. Again, I file this under you should move. First there was floods, then tornadoes, now locusts in your house. Locusts in your house? That's a sign to move.
Well, no, because we mentioned where are you going to go to? Because the Canada, they got the wildfires. Why don't they melt their northern half? But they've got wildfires. And not even the Tommy Rich kind.
There's got to be someplace. You can't say there's nowhere else, so I can't leave here.
There ain't no place. Ain't no place. Ain't no place to go. But anyway, so that's that. I want to say, so we're talking about some of the viewers, the cult of Cornette, the people out there. Talking to some of them today. Mike from Danville, Illinois, who we want to send our best wishes. First of all, he lost his wife to cancer back in February. She was only 49. But he sent a nice letter, and I got to hold on. I'm going to read the exact quote because he said he doesn't even watch wrestling these days. He just likes to listen to us talk about it, even if he doesn't know who we're talking about. But he said, I was a big wrestling fan in the glory days of the 70s and 80s. He grew up on Dick the Bruiser, Ox Baker, etc. When wrestling was actually wrestling and the boys were their own men instead of a product, actors reciting written lines and not worried about doing every move and to book every match. And that was said so well.
It's one of those things that really stuck out to me this week with AEW specifically, but WWE's none the better. When I first watched wrestling, and again, this is pretty late in the life of kayfabe, in like 89, I didn't watch it, and my first thought wasn't, well, this is a big athlete playing a role. This is a big musclehead reading a script. And I know you didn't, but it was a different business then than 1989, obviously. It was really more reality-based in a lot of ways, just based on the people in it. But I always find myself thinking about it because I know how I react to it when you watch a lot of these promos. When I watched The New Day a couple weeks ago on Raw, or when I watched a few of the things on AEW, it comes across like people reciting things and putting on a performance as opposed to believing in anyone, really believing in anyone. Believing not like what they say and what they stand for, just believing they are who they are, believing they are the person standing there.
The key is even if they want to consider themselves actors, and because they have writers and they're, being given a role to play by the employer or whatever the quote was, you still find an actor that can look and act like the person that they're supposed to be, right? You don't. That's the point, I think, that's lost on a lot of the children in the business these days, both the ones running the businesses and the ones working in the businesses, is just because you concoct this persona for yourself in your head doesn't mean that you actually look like that son of a bitch, or that you act like them, or you talk like them. And there has to be some element of logic, realism, and legitimacy in who the guy is supposed to be and how he can connect with the people, rather than just, oh, let's make Joe over there the goddamn, badass, and we'll look at the state of him. Well, it doesn't mean he can cut the promo. He can say all the words. Well, he doesn't sound like it. You get the point. And that's the problem that we find, is that the guys that Mike was talking about, and the guys that you're talking about, and the guys that I saw, they didn't consider themselves actors playing a part, and no one else was telling them what to say. They were being told what to talk about, but not really how. And so they had to come up with what worked for them. Many succeeded, many failed, but what worked for them based on what people bought from them, what they sounded like, what they looked like, what kind of personality they could pull off, and what their personality was, then fleshed it out. That's why I won't say no two guys sounded alike on interviews, but you've got the Terry Funk, Dick Slater syndrome. But there were a few homages. You got the superstar Billy Graham imitators, et cetera, but it was all different people. And they were doing what they thought best. And some stood and some fell, but at least you got the good stuff. That's why all the personalities were over. Because they were all different, because they were different people. Anywho. Brian, do you know where Pawtucket, Rhode Island is?
Yes, I do. The Pawtucket Red Sox.
Are they the ones that kicked the shit out of the Mets this week?
First of all, the Mets have the best record in baseball. The Mets are the best team in baseball, and they haven't played the Red Sox, no. Or they're not playing them anytime soon.
Oh, well, so one of these days the Mets will work
and
up.
That's a minor league team. The Pawtucket team is a minor league team. It's not the majors.
Oh, I thought the Mets had to work up to where they could play the Pawtucket.
Yeah, okay.
Pansies or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, Jonathan from Pawtucket, if you're listening, he sent me a wonderful letter, an actual letter in the mail, along with a picture of his father. His father passed away in February. He was 69 years old, but his dad was his hero. And he remembered how happy he was. He sent me a picture of the Rhode Island Fan Fest I did in 2015 with me and his dad, and said he, had a great time that day, and sent a real nice letter. And I just wanted to say hello to Jonathan. And here is a quote, Brian, from another member of the cult who shall remain nameless in case he ever wants to get a job again. But he said to both of us, he enjoys the programs. He says, just so you know, I hadn't watched wrestling since I left my video editor position at WWE in 2010. And I only started again after listening to your shows on Spotify just so I could see if it's as awful as you and Brian say. Yeah, it's awful. I regret everything.
Jesus.
Thanks.
Jesus Christ. I regret everything.
I regret everything. We have made him completely turn on the last 15 years of his life.
Signed Kevin Dunn.
And he also does offer an invitation. He knows I'm not going to come to Connecticut, but if you come to Connecticut, he'll take you out for pizza if you use the Merritt Parkway for the entire trip and complain the entire time.
Well, one goes hand in hand with the other, naturally.
Yes.
But no, I get my own pizza. Thank you, sir.
And we want a happy birthday to Hot Rod, Rodney Estee, down there in beautiful Mississippi.
Yeah.
He gets a little respect once a year on his birthday. I don't know how old he is. He's looks much older than he always has looked much older than he is. He's a mature person.
John Fell, what's with the camera? It's a parking lot.
It's not with him. It's not, he doesn't look frivolous like a youngster. He has the responsible look of an adult and very little hair to go along with it. Happy birthday, Rod.
Happy birthday.
Also, I'm going to withhold another name, but I thought this comment might be interesting, Brian. It's from someone who is unnamed, who lives in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And he said he's been a loyal listener to the shows for the last 5 years or so. And he sent me a few other, I don't want to narrow down too much who this might be, but he sent me a few other topics on his connection with wrestling. But he basically says, I was in the same training class group with Kenny Omega in 2000. And we had many matches early on. And believe me, Kenny was always athletically gifted, but certainly was not a guy I would sit and chat with longer than 10 minutes, as anything in common stopped at that point. So I thought that was kind of an insight into, it seems like that's what we kind of figured from deducing him from watching him on television and hearing his interviews on the interwebs is, God damn, if I had to talk to this motherfucker for more than 5 minutes.
That's kind of what we always heard. We hear from people in AEW. We haven't heard in a while because we haven't asked anyone, but way back when things were high and hot and heavy, you'd hear, hey, what's going on with Omega? He's a nice guy. He's just so weird. He's just weird. Yeah, I get along with him. I can't talk to him. He's a weird guy. You would hear weird over and over and over again. He looks spaced out. He's weird.
Sometimes interspersed with strange. Here's something we might need to discuss for a second here, because we might need to press into service the members of the Cult of Cornette who do the detective work for us here on some occasions. When we need to find out certain things, Brian, what's going on, boots on the ground, maybe Nick Barrett, the Sergeant at Arms. Maybe he might be able to put his boots on the ground and find out what's going on here, because a little birdie that I know informed me of this. Once again, don't want to publicly hold anyone up for potential retribution, but have you heard how low, this is kind of a silly question, have you heard how low Jelly Nutella can stoop, but have you heard how much lower he is potentially stooping lately?
I'll have to be honest with you. I haven't heard too much about him other than the Sabu thing, so I have no idea where you're going.
Guess what he's apparently selling on his merchandise table now at some of the independent shows across the country and the nation that he goes to?
Panties? I don't know.
No, he's got those on. He doesn't want to lose those. He is selling pieces of the barbed wire from the barbed wire match of Sabu's last match that he was just in.
Where was that? That was in Vegas?
Well, wherever it was, it was in goddamn Bizarro World for that, for whatever the point is. But apparently, my little bird saw someone holding it who had purchased it at the show that they were at, a jar with a piece of the barbed wire from his last match with Sabu with some kind of label on it, with Sabu's last match, barbed wire, whatever the fuck, right?
Come see the blob in person. It's just a fucking piece of jello.
Yeah, the strange, incredible thing. Pay 10 cents a piece, folks. What do you think it is? Look inside the jar. But now here's the thing. Here's why we need detective work. Maybe that Jelly is only as slimy as we've already known he is, because that's good enough, and he's not any slimier. And he's trying to do something to raise some money. Because, since the guy just died and they put up a GoFundMe for his funeral expenses, the family, one would think that this guy who was in the ring with him, if he's going to sell the barbed wire, wouldn't you kick back a little bit to the GoFundMe? Now, I don't know. Maybe the little bird didn't see the big sign up on the table that said portion, or if I'm a human being, all of the proceeds will go to Sabu's funeral expenses, family, whatever. Maybe they didn't see that sign, but if anybody happens to have a flat tire, carburetor go out, you break down, you walk into some abandoned warehouse, and there's one of the shows that Jelly works on is taking place. See if he's selling this, and see if he's telling people that this is going to Sabu. And I think somebody in Sabu's family ought to know, if he's telling people some of it's going to Sabu, are they going to get it or not? They ought to then be expecting it. Shouldn't we even hold the blobs of the underground wrestling industry to some kind of standard? If you see a guy selling barbed wire at a wrestling show, and he looks like a half-baked brown and serve roll covered in pubic hair, then ask Jelly, hey, are you just profiting off a dead man, or are you kicking back some of this to the estate? See what he said. What's next, Brian? Are they going to start selling the organs? Big wrestling star dies broke. Instead of donating the body to science, they fucking donate it to goddamn high spots. They chop it up and sell pieces.
Wrestlers typically, especially ones that haven't made millions and millions of dollars, will do anything for money and sell anything for money. So shouldn't be surprised what will come next. My only question would be, because again, I don't know too much about this, so I don't want to comment because I don't know what is going on there. But if it's the barbed wire from the match, and the match was in Vegas, and this is a convention somewhere other than Vegas, did they just wrap up all the barbed wire? Like, how does that work for barbed wire matches? If you have a barbed wire match somewhere, do you leave it there and just get new barbed wire when you go someplace else, or do you reuse the same barbed wire?
Well, that is a good thing, a good subject you bring up, or a good question. Excellent question, Shelton. Because here's the thing, it's Jelly. We don't even know if it's the real barbed wire from the real match. But if it was, did he say, okay, wind all of it off the ring and then fucking put it in my backpack or my duffel bag or whatever? Then how'd you get, maybe he rides the ring truck. He's like a wrestling hobo. He's not flying. He rode the ring truck back to Asbury Park or wherever he's
But that's
from.
my question. I've never thought of this before. Do you re-spool up the barbed wire and use it again, or do you get a new barbed wire for every barbed wire match?
Well, I told you, you're not having them nightly.
Well, some of these people may be. I really don't know.
Well, no, they don't even work nightly of any show of any kind. No, the only comparison that I can think of in the territory days, when they were having the same match every night, you had the ring wrapped in barbed wire where they worked it and didn't, fucking go crazy and wrap the tables and everything. Yeah, you just cut it down and boom, and that was the end of it. Although somebody with the building probably ended up taking some of it, or maybe, if it was Eddie Marlin, he took it back, used it on his farm or whatever, on Jarrett's farm or whatever. But, this idiot, and plus think how much barbed wire that is. It would have been literally hundreds of feet by the time they finish wrapping everything. So he can't have all of it. But again, what if did he check that in his baggage?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Can you
100
fly?
feet of barbed wire?
Can you fly with barbed wire? Even if it was just a little, hey, give me a little bit just so I could bring it to a convention. Can you fly with barbed wire?
I don't think you can carry it on.
What's this in your bag? That's barbed wire.
Did he buy an extra suitcase to put barbed wire in to take back home? Or again, I think he probably rides on the ring truck because, it's the garbage wrestling company. So GCW. So he's in with them. That's why he gets to work on these things. It's a charity from the Money Mark.
What's the process of disposing of barbed wire?
I don't know. I'm not in the habit of throwing a lot of barbed wire away. I would assume that there's some type of, you could take it to the dump, I assume, if you're just disposing of it. If it's old rusty barbed wire, you wouldn't be trying to reuse it for any purpose. Perhaps some of the fencing professionals out there in the audience can tell us what...
yes, you professional fencers.
I've heard that's a big sport these days. And I'm thinking, how do they really make fencing a sport? Is it like how many feet you get done in a certain amount of time or how high you can build the thing?
Do you think it would have gone with your gimmick? Like in the early days, if there was like a vignette video and you took off the hood and it was you trying to fence? Not necessarily succeeding, but the rich kid doesn't just play tennis, he fences.
Well, actually, we did something like that one time, but the problem was right before the guy came in to do the shoot, he got caught with the stolen goods and I wasn't able to buy them from him. So, but that was going to be how I was making extra money on the side. Fencing.
Barbed wire.
So
fencing barbed wire.
Yes, it was some gently used barbed wire that had been stolen out of a barbed wire yard, or maybe one of those all night barbed wire and wicker places. Have you ever been there?
I've not been to one of these barbed wire and wicker joints, no.
They used to, that leads me into our next story, actually, because right off the interstate, Interstate 81 up in Harrisonburg, Virginia, they used to have, is where the businesses are clustered at the interstate exit there. And they used to actually, honest to God, have a business in this little strip mall area that was a lawnmower repair and tax service. And I've just always enjoyed that. But that brings me to my next email from John. See, I can give his name because he's not going to get threatened about anything. But John is from the Harrisonburg, Virginia area, at least, because he said that he caught a WCW show in Harrisonburg back in probably 1990. He said, I would have been around 12 years old. Anyway, he had a question. He said, that night, Ron Simmons, working as a babyface, was making his way to the ring, and a fan at the guardrail started mouthing off to Ron. Ron stopped and exchanged some words with the fan. The fan then proceeded to spit in Ron's face. Ron, in the blink of an eye, jerked this fan over the guardrail and proceeded to shoot on him with rapid punches until the fan was bloody and wobbly. The Harrisonburg police officers in attendance helped the fan to his feet and then took him out in handcuffs to the paramedics and probably jail after that, I'm assuming. A lot of people said it was a work and the fan was a plant. But being a lifelong fan of 40 plus years, I've never been able to make sense of that. What would a babyface Ron Simmons have to gain by beating the shit out of a fan unless he was trying to turn heel? He still had his match that night, worked as a babyface. Jim, you were there that night with the Midnight Express. I was just wondering if you have any memory of this or memories of Harrisonburg, Virginia. Well, first of all, that I can see that happen, and I didn't see it, but I can see it in my mind's eye, and that tickled me just to read that. To be honest, that was the dark last year of WCW. Hence, that's why we were at Harrisonburg High School with a national television show and a fucking touring company of wrestlers making six figures a year, and we're doing shows at the Harrisonburg High School. But at that point in time, I can pretty much assume that me, Bobby, and Stan were all sitting in the locker room, engaging in some kind of misery, just waiting until our time was the bell would ring and we could go so we could get the fuck out of there and get back to Charlotte. Right.
When did you say this was? Because he's babyface Ron Simmons would have been before Doom. So this is 89?
Yeah, well, probably 89 or 90-ish. Anytime after
no, it had to be before then, because Ron Simmons was a heel from mid-89 on.
Okay, but then that means earlier in 89, TBS still owned the company.
Yeah. It could have been the end of 88 or 89. That's the only time it could have been.
Okay, well, you know better than John, because he was 12 years old. What 12-year-old remembers anything?
I was 9.
But but you've studied since. He's had a real life.
I study.
But you study so you can learn. You never stop learning, Brian. As you study all this stuff.
It's just sad you don't want to learn.
The point being, it's sad to say I don't even remember Ron coming back and saying, oh, yeah, I punched the shit out of this guy. But no, if you spit in Ron Simmons' face where he's a baby face or a heel or in a goddamn coma, you're getting, quote unquote, what was it? Rapid punches until you're bloody and wobbly. But that's the thing at Harrisonburg, because I have different memories. Crockett actually ran Harrisonburg, Virginia in the Crockett days, and it was like everything else. Somebody said, well, everything drew in those days, and it did. And then, unfortunately, that's where a lot of the WCW shows ended up, as we've talked about, after TBS took over, in that they had blown the house show market just completely up, and nobody was coming to the big towns. They were going to smaller towns around the Southeast, and there's no way to make money because of the money they were paying the guys that were, versus what you could conceivably expect to do in Harrisonburg, Virginia, right? Even if you were hot. But then in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, talking about Harrisonburg stories, this is an example of when you have the right local promoters. We've been talking about local promoters. We've done the wrestling history segments lately. You could have made something of that area in Virginia because there were wrestling fans, but you need the right people to put the shows together from all aspects of it. And in Smoky Mountain, we got, Channel 3 is what it was in Harrison, based out of Harrisonburg, Virginia. That's a part of Virginia that's not anywhere really around Norfolk or Hampton, but it is farther east and north than Richmond. And it's not quite as far as whether it could be suburban Washington, D.C., right? So it's a nice television station there that serves a wide area of that central Virginia, or whatever they call it, that part of the state. And we got TV there, and the TV station was, very easy to work with. And we ran a couple of Smoky Mountain shows up there, but the problem was for us, it was 300, depending on whether you were living in Knoxville or Morristown, it was between, I think, like 325 and 350 miles away, straight through Virginia up the interstate. And it was its own television market. So it's not like there was any overlap with anything else that we were doing down there. And we ran it a couple times, but just with the local group, I can't even remember now, don't have my notes in front of me, at the school sponsoring us, you could do 300 or 400 people or 500 people or whatever. But what we could, and it wasn't really, by the time you lug that ring 600 miles up the goddamn interstate and back, and all the boys have gone as far north in the territory as possible just for one show, it wasn't worth it. you needed to get 2 or 3 shows on a weekend in a market like that. And that's where a guy that lived there locally would have come in handy. A guy that knew and that's why all the Fuller family and the Welches and all these used to be sent to all these different places all over the South, because they knew the business. They knew how and where to hustle people and what stores to go to poster and papers, publicity. They'd get the ins with the radio station. And then you find in your television, coverage area that goes 70 miles in any direction from Harrisonburg, Virginia, you find 2 or 3 towns you can run once every couple months on a weekend and draw 500 people apiece. And then you got something on a territory basis put together. And that's what we had in Eastern Kentucky and in East Tennessee. But, that was out in the wilderness like that. Remember Dennis Chestnut in Barberville, Kentucky, was a town gadabout, owned Chestnut's tax service, but liked to raise money for the Knox Central High School sports teams there. And when he took that fucking town, we drew between 750 and 1,000 people once a month in Barberville, Kentucky, which I think was the population. You've been there once, at least 5,000 people. I don't know.
I was there twice.
But anyway, with Harrisonburg, he asked about Harrisonburg stories. That was another area that we were hoping to be able to exploit in Smoky Mountain. But, it was too far. It's too far away to keep an eye on for a local territory. But the last time that I went to Harrisonburg, it's me, it's Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, Killer Kyle, and Jimmy Del Rey. We all rode, because it's so far up there, we all rode together, right? And when we get out of the matches, there is absolutely nothing open to get anything to eat except Denny's, because this is 30 years ago. So, all right, well, we're starving. Before we go 6 hours, it's going to be just worse. We get on the interstate in the middle of the night. We'll go to Denny's. We'll wait 20, 30 minutes, hopefully, for food. We'll eat. We'll get out of here. We sit down. We order everything on the menu you can imagine. And Kyle could eat better than me. And I swear to God, we've been sitting there about 20 or 30 minutes. And just I'm starting to think, is the food ever going to come? Here comes the waiter. But this bumblefuck, think about this, Brian. All 4 of us, and we're starving, and we're going to be driving for the next 6 hours. So we've ordered a lot of food, right? They didn't send 2 or 3 people out carrying shit, or they didn't send a wheelie cart carrying shit or rolling shit. They sent this one fucking guy with about 8 dinners on this giant tray, and he literally gets within 10 feet of us and turns sideways to try to go around a chair on the other table and pitched that thing over his shoulder right at our fucking feet. Every fucking burger and steak and sandwich and fry and sauce and fucking. And we just looked at it for a second. I said, is that ours? And they said, oh, please bear with us. We'll fix this up right away. I said, you're going to start it from scratch. It just took half an hour. We got to go 300 miles. So we had to, and then not only they started from scratch again, but now it smells, they're scraping it up right next to us. And it smells so good. And I'm like, wait, stop. Did that touch the floor yet? And, so that's my last time I was in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Officially, I've driven through there a couple times since then.
What was everyone else's reaction when all of a sudden this guy? Did you guys see it coming? Did you see like this guy?
They weren't having. Well, no, see it coming.
Did you see like, oh, this guy's got a problem here before he went down?
No, see it coming. Well, here was the goddamn scene where it's the middle of let's say 11:15 or 11:30 in Harrisonburg, Virginia. We're the only ones in this fucking place practically. And we're sitting around this table, and if they can see us, it's Killer Kyle, it's me, in my striped Zubaz, Jimmy Del Rey, who stood out like a sore thumb, and poor Brian. And so as we're sitting there and we're the only occupants of anything for 20 feet around, here comes this guy carrying what looks like the goddamn Grinch's sled going up Mount Crumpet. So we saw it coming like they saw the tanks and fucking the streets in goddamn Germany. And we're watching him as he's coming, and I was like, is this a good idea? And then as he's going into this giant open area next to us, all he has to do is step around this one fucking chair, and he turned his hip went sideways, and the fucking thing went over his shoulder.
I have some updates if you want any news updates.
Yes, what's happening?
The Diddy trial is happening right now as we are recording.
Again with you and this guy. I'm starting to wonder.
What are you starting to wonder?
You're continually bringing up Diddy. Do you have a duty to be Diddy's daddy?
Well, again, I don't want no Diddy. I don't want any association with Diddy, but it may associate with Vince McMahon. We don't know. So it's here's the update.
Oh, wait a minute. Is there going to be a crossover?
We'll see, but special.
Is that like when Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies went to Petticoat Junction? Now we get Vince and Diddy?
Well, we'll see. We'll see how this all ends up, but it seems very familiar, some of this. But according to Special Agent Andre Lamont, who's testifying this morning as we are recording, 900 bottles of Astroglide and 200 bottles of baby oil were seized from Sean Diddy Combs' home. Sean Diddy Combs' home in Los Angeles when they raided his property in March of 24. 900 bottles of Astroglide.
900 bottles of lube on the wall. 900 bottles of lube.
And they were on the wall. At least 16 large brown boxes of lube that were stacked on top of each other in a wall of the garage were recovered, according to images shown. That's not. See, the funny thing is not just that it was raided. Jury, we want you to see these photos. See 900 bottles. This is what it looks like. All right. Well, that's the update.
That does seem to lend some credence to some of the stories then that you wouldn't normally think that anybody besides Johnson & Johnson would have 900 bottles of lube on their wall. Here's an update, Brian, on something we've been talking about here lately, the early TV wrestling. We got earlier because what we talked about last week about the experimental broadcasts over here from our friend Adam's research over in, where's he from? In his various parts. Well, he's from the UK, somewhere there. I don't want to just, yes, but now Steve from New Zealand.
Yeah, this is Steve Ogilvy. This guy's a serious historian. I know Steve.
Well, you know Steve. And that's even better than knowing Bo. Except if Bo knows you know Steve, and then there's going to be trouble. So nevertheless, Steve Ogilvy from New Zealand. I didn't know if you wanted to just out him as being, one of us for fear that he might be run off from his home country. But, well, that's why he says he sent this directly because, or emailed this instead of sending it directly to you because he annoys you.
He doesn't
annoy you that much?
He does not annoy me in any way. He's a historian. That's when you say Steve from New Zealand, there's only one. It's Steve Ogilvy. And he
says he's emailing this instead of messaging you directly because he's annoyed you enough.
Well, whenever there's a guest to program, he, lends pictures. I don't know what he sends.
He lends an unwanted opinion or an unsolicited piece of advice.
He's never annoyed me. I don't know why are you believing this liar? He's never annoyed me. Believe me, he's never annoyed me.
He just chimes in whether his name is mentioned or not. Hey, Steve, let me tell you, you just go in the back, and when we need you, we will send for you.
Steve was very close with Dave Cameron, the wrestling historian.
Oh, so that's who he had Harley with. Okay, now I understand.
What?
It was
all right.
Steve.
You see, I regret saying anything.
Well, that's.
Thanks for writing in, really, Steve.
That's what the listeners say every week about you. They regret that you said anything, but nevertheless. Steve did have one piece of advice to give us before he never speaks to us again.
Get out of show business.
Apparently, there was earlier television wrestling than there was from, what did we say, 1942 over here. We had narrowed it down to those experimental broadcasts in Schenectady. But now he being Steve, says the earliest known televised bout took place before the Second World War on the 12th of March, 1938 by the BBC in London. So that, those BBC, they're snooty son of a bitches. They always got to be first with everything. The bout was Earl McCready, who, of course, was a former amateur great and then was one of the top pros of that time period, originally from Canada, against Percy Foster from South Africa. I don't know much about Percy, but it's amazing because Steve included a picture, or screenshots, as they say, of the Radio Times magazine, the magazine that was the radio schedule in London, at least as of 1938, when this issue was printed. But it also had a television schedule of their early experimental television broadcasts. And I'll skip ahead for a second, go back to the match. He actually also sent advertising for the television sets that were available in London at the time. This was 1938. There were between 3,000 and 4,000 television sets in London, and they were owned by the very wealthy because there was a model with a 4-inch screen, like 4.5 by 4.5 inches. Wow. Brian, imagine that.
Wow.
That was available for the equivalent of like $8,000 or $9,000 today. And it also had a built-in radio, or they had the top of the line model was a cabinet floor standing device that had a radio and a television screen that looked like, to be honest, it was probably about 12 or 13 inches like TV when I was a kid. And that was 20 grand in today's money. But anyway, the Radio Times had the television listings, and apparently about this match, there was commentary for the match, which may have been simulcast on radio, not sure, but there was no audience because Steve has seen a picture from one of these matches, and it's the two wrestlers in the ring, a referee, and a bare studio with the announcer at the desk. And so this was, in the experimental stages. And he said there were several other wrestling shows broadcast by the BBC before and after the war. And then obviously ITV, which is the World of Sport Wrestling that the modern fans may have heard of, started in the UK from 1955 onwards. But never again, and obviously these things don't exist because they weren't even recorded at the time. They were just broadcast live as they happened, and there was really no method at the time of recording it and broadcasting at the same time in the 30s, right? You had to do one or the other. Even with a kinescope, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
anyhow,
I'm looking here at the schedule that he sent. Like for Saturday, March 12th, which is the day at 9:40 p.m., you have Catch As Catch Can Wrestling, what you listed earlier. 2:30 and approximately 3:35, Inter-University Sports. Some of the events of the Oxford versus Cambridge sports will be televised, conditions permitting, directly from the White City. At 3:15, we have gardening, crafting fruit trees. At 3:25, news film. And then we have nothing until 9 o'clock. Cabaret cartoons. At 9, followed by 9:30, news film, followed by 9:40, Catch As Catch Can. That's what fascinates me. The entire, what was on a schedule, what constituted a schedule back then and for the next 10 years, 15 years, really. I mean, this is so early. This is what,
1938 is the first one.
Yeah, so really for the next 15 years, everything was just getting established and the war delayed everything.
Well, and especially in England, the war caused major delays because they sound like they were ahead of the United States before the war.
News film, though. Not news film. British movie tone.
Yes. Well, it's like the Edward R. Murrow would have just been getting started, but whoever the voice was, that would say, and now the news, and they'd have the movie tone news. Those were the newsreels that would be played in the theaters along with the cartoons and the coming attractions before you got to see the movie. This is London.
It's amazing. We have people from New Zealand telling us about what's happening in England in 1938, and then we have people from England telling us what was happening in the States in the 50s and the 40s.
I have people hopefully telling me what's going on in the world today, so I don't have to fucking actually participate. But here's something. Let's stay in the 30s, Brian. Here's something that I found, a little tidbit that I jotted down a couple weeks ago while I was looking through some books, researching one of my upcoming projects. And this just, if you want to talk about the local wrestling promotion, who was a major name or a major draw in a particular market, how that the boys sometimes were better off back in the old days financially than they are now, all this kind of stuff. I'm fascinated by these things. And this just falls into all of it. And it's a little trivia, but it's interesting. Do you know? I don't even know how to ask this question, actually. But Amarillo, Texas. The Funk family obviously ruled there for 30 years, and it was a major market in terms of guys going there to learn from Dory Sr. to get experience. Eddie Graham did it. Dorian Terry obviously did it. Some of the Japanese guys that were sent to learn. Amarillo was a big deal in wrestling, but it's still a smaller market in terms of the size of the cities in the United States. And I've worked there before in a couple of different buildings. We worked there when we were in World Class in Dallas, and they ran, oh goddamn, I can't remember. It was a convention center, a newer building sometimes, and they weren't doing shit, but the building, probably only held 3,000 or 4,000 people anyway. And then there's the old building, the Coliseum in Amarillo. I think it's at the fairgrounds. That's where the old-fashioned shit used to take place with the Funks. That's where we had where we worked on the show that Terry had put together for John Ayers down there. And they had the car dealership, and it was the Heavenly Bodies versus Dory and Dick Murdoch. And there was like 6,500 people there. It was sold out. It was a beautiful fucking crowd, right? But do you know that they were drawing bigger crowds in Amarillo, Texas, years before, crowds that wouldn't even have fit in those buildings, years before the Funk's territory or the modern day WWE or whatever? I will tell you something that will blow your mind. On June 20th, 1930, in Amarillo, Texas, the local guy, the hero, Cal Farley, challenged Jack Reynolds for the world welterweight title. And Jack Reynolds, you probably got a ton of posters on him. He was a name as one of the lighter weight pro wrestlers in the 20s and 30s, right? And, he traveled something like a territory traveling champion. But they had this match, and Cal Farley was a wrestler in those days, but then he became a businessman in Amarillo after he retired from the ring, and he always still had something to do with the business, either in front of the camera, behind the scenes. Sometimes people didn't know he was involved, but he was involved. but he was the local hero at that time. Guess what the attendance was? They went outdoors to a ballpark. What was the attendance on June 20th, 1930 for Cal Farley versus Jack Reynolds and 2 other matches with 4 other guys on the card?
I have no idea.
8,164 people.
Wow.
And the population of Amarillo, which today is about 200,000, was at that point in time, in the 1930 census, 43,956. Now, also think about this. Nobody flew to that show, okay? Let's just make that perfectly clear, that nobody flew to that show in June 1930. So that means that they either, and literally some people, I am sure, and it's not a joke, rode horses in Amarillo on June 20th, 1930. But in a city of 44,000 people, in the first full year of the Depression, which was going to get worse, but wasn't a box of fluffy ducks at that point, no air travel whatsoever, no interstate highways. I can, again, this is not a joke. Many of these city streets in Amarillo were recently paved, if yet, at that point. And you know what kind of cars people had in the 1920s? And this was front page news in that town, in all the newspapers. The match was broadcast on radio because that follows up on another thing we've been talking about. We talked about the early TV broadcasts. Several people have asked us, well, has there ever been a history of matches on radio? Yes, there was. The problem is it's only, the announcer calling it, and I don't know whether any of that, still exists on tape or not, or any kind of recording. But there was, that radio was a method of communication at the time, and of news, and also of advertising. But this match was so big in the market that the wrestling promoters weren't using radio to advertise. The radio was advertising the match because it was news, and broadcasted because it was a big fucking sporting event in town. And every business in town took ads out in the newspaper. Again, Scott Teal at crowbarpress.com, folks. If you want to, he has the history of Amarillo as one of his many books, and we encourage you to, but he's got the newspaper ads and stories reprinted where every business in town took the ads out, said, best wishes, Cal, because he was a local hero. And the tickets were between $1 and $1.50. So you figure maybe they did $10,000 with 8,000 people in attendance, right? But that's the equivalent, because $1 in 1930 equals $20 today. Look up your inflation calculator. There's a period in the mid-30s during the depth of the Depression where $1 is worth almost $30. But nevertheless, that was the equivalent of 6 guys on a card with one main event singles match, drawing a $200,000 gate with local promotion in a city of less than 50,000 people. The kind of promotion it takes for that was the old days of pioneer wrestling promotion. They were probably knocking on doors and they were building it up. And of course, Cal Farley was the local hero, but people knew Jack Reynolds from the paper, and he'd been there before, and he was the welterweight champion. Is our boy going to win? And then after they did that, they did a rematch, but they waited 1 year and 2 days later. June 22nd, 1931, they go outside again, Metro Park, if that means anything to the fans in Amarillo. And they had a rematch, 2 out of 3 falls with a 2-hour time limit. And Reynolds beat Farley in the first fall, but the second fall, they ran the 2-hour time limit out. And the attendance was 7,500. Almost the same thing as the previous year. And it's just, again, when you think about just the percentage of people, and yes, Lubbock is 60 miles away. Lubbock is smaller than Amarillo. So Lubbock was a town of 30,000 that you had to get in your Model T and drive 60 miles at 20 miles an hour in goddamn hot West Texas weather with no air conditioning. But still, they're drawing from a population of jack shit in the Depression. And they do 2 matches a year apart and sell over 15,000 tickets for the both of them. That was pioneer fucking wrestling promotion. And those people believed the goddamn, our Cal is going to bring the thing home, right? That's what I would have liked to have been around, not for the no air conditioning, but to see what that fucking atmosphere must have been like in those days, in a town like that, with a match like that everybody was into.
I mean, that was the thing with the Funks, too. It was our Funks. You know, they grew up there. I mean, Dory Sr. obviously ended up there from Indiana, but Terry and Dory, it wasn't just like when they became wrestlers, people became aware of them. They knew them beforehand. And you got to watch them grow up. And once Amarillo kind of lost that, even though the Funks still kind of came in, I don't know what could have been done, to be quite honest, but when it was Murdoch and, who was it Murdoch and Blackjack Mulligan? Who bought Amarillo from the
Mulligan?
Funks?
M&M Enterprises.
Well, it didn't resonate the same way, you know, for a lot of reasons. And again, it was a changing business, but Amarillo is one of those places where you kind of needed a hometown guy. It worked. I mean, all those Texas towns, you know, the Lawman, Ricky Romero, the Von Erichs, you needed a hometown guy.
Well, but here's that local promoters in every town also, because Don the Lawman Slatton, he was the top guy in Abilene because he was the local promoter. But goddamn it, he was going to draw a crowd to see him, so they figured him in. And the Guerrero family, El Paso was their town.
Yeah.
You know, and so as guys gradually, you know, got over, they transitioned into those spots where, leading back to one of our previous subjects, you always had somebody that knew the wrestling business, that knew how to promote. And Cal Farley, by the way, I don't even know if I mentioned the Boys Ranch. When Eddie Graham went to West Texas in the mid-50s, before he went to New York and learned that style and that philosophy of the Funk and the Amarillo wrestling tradition before Dory Sr., because he learned some of it from guys like Cal Farley. Cal Farley's the one that set up the Boys Ranch for the underprivileged kids, Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. And then Eddie Graham goes to Florida and takes the concept, the Florida Boys Ranch, Sheriff's Boys Ranch, whatever they called it. And that's why Eddie Graham was always getting civic commendations on TV on the Florida show, because he made himself part of the state. And he really did do a lot of good for, you know, various charities, but it was publicized too, because he had learned that from West Texas. Oh, this is our family thing here, our local wrestling promotion, and they do things for the community. And Cal Farley had started that. That's and also underneath the rematch in 1931, Roy Welch wrestled on the undercard. And a lot of the shit that they were doing in Amarillo in the late 20s and early 30s is shit that he brought to Tennessee, and they were still doing in the 70s. It's amazing. The fucking, I don't know, what do you call it? The connections.
Degrees of separation.
Degrees of separation.
Hey, you brought it up, so let's give him a plug. He's a great friend of ours. Scott Teal, Crowbar Press, crowbarpress.com. The book, The Great Pro Wrestling Venues, Amarillo, 1911 to 1960, by Chris Knights and Scott Teal. 197 pages. This entire period, the rise of Dory Funk Sr., and so much more.
And the original Dutch Mantell, who must have been a heck of a fucking character. And those guys, I can only imagine what kind of fucking raw bone, badass son of a bitches those guys were.
I gotta go back. I'm looking at like what's in here. I gotta go back and read this. Penny Banner and 3 other lady wrestlers arrested for inciting a riot. Dutch Mantell's rumored engagement to a masked mystery girl. I gotta go back to this. The promoter sued for $10,000 when a sign fell on a wrestling fan. The in-ring wedding that ended in violence. Farm Boy, Dory Funk's 500-pound protege. Man, this is really, I kind of want to go back and read this right now.
Oh, but and that, the thing is when you see some of the things that they were doing, because some of the heels back in those days in the 30s, they would get arrested legitimately, have some kind of deal in public, and get arrested, go to jail, have a news story about it. Sometimes they may have known somebody with the police department. Sometimes maybe not. They just did it. It's happened numerous times both ways.
Way back, you remember we did one in the news. It was so good. It was from Florida, and it was like Eddie Graham was walking down the street. He saw Saul Weingroff coming the other way down the other street.
Yeah.
And he just went over, just had to punch him in the face. And he was arrested, and he got into all the papers that, man, he punched that no good Saul Weingroff. And then he did the same thing that Tuesday night.
Hey, they were doing the same thing. And in Amarillo, you'll hear a match result from 1936 where so-and-so apparently blinded his opponent with soap in the eyes before applying the pin. I mean, I was seeing that with the fucking heels in the early 70s in Tennessee.
That's what the Freebirds did to JYD, technically.
Well, yes. It's all from these guys at that period of time that were making this shit up as they went along. And then the people who learned from them spread it out to all parts of the globe. But you can almost, as I've been trying to work on figuring out who exactly was starting the Tennessee Southern style of wrestling, as some people put it, the old-fashioned Tennessee style, it may have come from Amarillo. And it didn't have anything to do with the Funks. They were doing it beforehand. All righty. Well, I'm going to apologize, Brian, if you hear some grumbling behind me. It's not actually me for once. It's the weather again, as we're getting a few... I'm looking over my shoulder here. It's got awful dark. We're getting a few rumbles of thunder and some torrential rain here right now. What's new in Louisville? But speaking of bad weather and an ill wind blowing, we mentioned, I guess last week now, here on one of the programs, that an old friend of ours had peeked his head back up above ground. And we're doing a little public servicing, because the public always loves to be serviced. Because Colin Thomson, the CEO, major domo, whatever you call it, of Kast Media, who we have had some dealings with in the past, the viewers may...
He actually stepped down. He stepped down as CEO. He's now the CEO, Chief Creative Officer, but he's the majority owner, over 99% owner of Kast Media.
How about this? He's the loose nut behind the wheel of Kast Media.
There you go. There you go.
And we've mentioned some of our dealings with him in the past. It's been an ongoing thing. And now what has prompted us to bring him up again in our ongoing lives and situation is that he has actually now had the gall, as Jackie Fargo said one time, the gall of you. He has had the gall to pop his head back up, issue press releases, announce that he's back in business, babies, and he's in the podcast business. He's making another run at this thing. He wants to not only help work with all the creators out there, but he wants to be a light, a pillar of truth and transparency in the whole podcasting industry and kind of reform things and just be a beacon of light, the guiding light, like Captain Lou Albano. While
on vacation in Acapulco. No, sorry.
On vacation.
No.
While he is still currently the subject of a lawsuit from Arcadian Vanguard and yours truly's over here for fraud. I guess we can say what the lawsuit is for. That's not any kind of defamatory declarative statement. We were suing him for fraud.
The lawsuit's public. Anything in the lawsuit can be said, yeah.
Yeah, and that's ongoing. So while he's the subject of fraud and has been cross-examined and depositioned and talked to numerous times, he and his associates over the last year in our fact-finding missions while we've been gathering information, he's decided he's just going to be a light of truth and a knight in shining armor for the podcasters these days. So we encourage the people. Not only did we talk about it on the show last week, it was the experience last week, wasn't it? Or was it the drive-through?
It was
you tell me.
Yeah, it was the experience.
It was the experience. And also, if you go to the Arcadian Vanguard Network YouTube channel, because the Arcadian Vanguard is the official Rumble official owners and perpetrators of this lawsuit and deposition videos. So the deposition videos clips are there at the Arcadian Vanguard Network YouTube channel. You can see an individual being cross-examined by Stephen P. New or deposed by Stephen P. New. Want to get the right terminology. And you can see that person sweating what appears to be 5 to 7 pounds off of his body weight in that period of time on a variety of topics. But we got one here today we want to play, Brian, just kind of give the people a little taste of what they sound like, of what they look like, and what this beacon of truth and light and transparency really sounds like. And by the way, I'll agree with the transparency because everybody's seeing right through it.
That's right. Apparently when he reappeared, because we heard from people who follow him on Instagram, which is a private account, so you kind of have to be locked in as a follower there, that he reappeared and all of a sudden it was like how this has brought him closer to God, this whole experience.
Well, our intention was to bring him quite a bit closer to God, but that was my first thought, but I was voted down in favor of the lawsuit.
No, all kidding aside though, I don't care. You know, you're kind of out of this because you're an atheist. But no matter what God you believe in, no matter who that God is, no matter what religion you believe in, do you think that God would come back to earth and say, Colin, I got to spend time with you? No. He's a godless, soulless ghoul who was raised wrong. And I'm saying that from my personal experience, having dealt with him. Just a Weasley ghoul. And apparently a lot of people from watching these deposition videos have thought he maybe hopped up on something. I didn't even pick up on that. I just thought it was all nervous tics.
No, and that was a lot of comments that a lot of people who were former users of these substances were making. Not that we're casting any aspersions, but, you know, that was just a lot of people saying it.
Not the kratom, ladies and gentlemen. But what we have here, and again, our money never got to us because it arrived at Kast Media, and the person running every single angle of Kast Media with complete control over the finances going in and out, decided at the same time him and his wife were living it up. I think it was $500,000 in travel in 2022.
1 year.
Yeah, in 1 year. While all this was going on, we weren't getting paid. Other podcasters weren't getting paid. People who needed that money badly weren't getting it, even though it came in. You know, this isn't a situation, I said it before, where the advertisers and the advertising agencies didn't pay Kast Media. They did. The person running everything from Kast Media made sure, decided not to send that money along. And a lot of questions have come out, where did all the money go? And it went to a lot of places. And what we're going to play here, Jim, again, this is from the Arcadian Vanguard channel on YouTube, from the deposition of Kast Media's Colin Thomson. We're going to review this This is Stephen P. New deposing Colin August 1st, 2024, about the company cars, the expenses that were on the books for Kast Media for vehicles, and what those vehicles were, and where they are now. I want to remind you, this guy was running a podcast company. If you want to argue he needed a company car, it may be a fair argument, even though he owns the entirety of the company, just about. But what kind of car do you really need? Even if you're going to do the whole fake it till you make it thing. What do you need? What do you want? What do you do with it? For the record, I drive a Honda Accord. But let's go to this, Jim. From the deposition of Kast Media's Colin Thomson, the cars.
All right, let's look at expenses. Auto expense, $1,328.32. Tell me what that is.
That is a vehicle.
Which vehicle?
Which vehicle? That is a, I believe that was a Mercedes G-Series.
Let me stop there, because a lot of people jump on this. A lot of difficulty saying the simple things quickly. Right? What was that? I'll repeat the question, and then I will slowly try to think of a creative answer. But let's get back to this. Another thing, people, I gotta stop it again. He's drinking coffee. He drank more sips out of this cup of coffee than it's possible to get coffee into the cup. Back to this.
Is it titled in Kast's name?
No, that vehicle is not in Kast's name.
In whose name is the vehicle that this auto expense is paid for titled?
I believe is my name.
Is this the only auto expense Kast Media Inc. has paid for you?
No.
What other auto expenses has Kast paid for you?
There's a different Mercedes and there's a Tesla. And those are the two that I can directly recall.
Let me stop there. He's not even saying that's everything. That's just what he could directly recall. 2 Mercedes and a Tesla, 3 cars. Who the hell needs that many cars to run a podcast company? Why do you need 2 cars at once to run a podcast company? But 3 cars, 3 luxury cars. Any thoughts?
Well, now, see, that's the thing, Brian, is that one of them is going to run out of gas. While you send a member of your team to go fill that one up, you got to drive the other one, but then the ashtray is going to get filled up in that one. So while you get that one over to the car wash, you got to drive another one.
It's a good deal, too, because once a member of your team comes over to help you, you don't pay them. But let's go back to the deposition of Kast Media's Colin Thomson, the cars.
Does Kast continue to pay your Mercedes G-Wagon payment?
No.
When did Kast last pay your Mercedes G-Wagon payment?
I think probably before the petition date.
Do you still own the Mercedes G-Wagon?
No.
Did you let it go back?
What does that mean?
Did you let Mercedes or a lending company repossess the G-Wagon?
No.
Where is the G-Wagon now?
I sold it.
You sold it?
Yep.
When did you sell it?
I think towards the beginning of this year.
I got this Mercedes. I can't remember when I sold that Mercedes. Maybe it was the beginning of the year.
He can't remember things from a few months beforehand. He's like, because he knows when he filed the petition. Which, by the way, we got things that he contradicts in his own words. He contradicts things that he wrote in his own pen.
Yes, well, but also I guess a lot of people are saying, well, hey, he was a big businessman. Why should he remember about this car sale? Well, there's a reason why. Line of questioning is headed in this direction. Counselor Stephen P. New will explain further.
And by the way, we're not sure exactly which car. At least I'm not here. I don't have it in front of me. But the 2025 Mercedes-Benz G-Class One of them starts at $148,000. One of them starts at $161,000. One at $186,000. So not a cheap car. Not a car you just need to get around. The car you need.
Not taking the kids to soccer.
That's right. Let's go back to this clown.
Early 2024?
Yeah, sometime in probably Q1 of 2024.
Was it financed at the time that Kast was paying the $1,328.32 auto expense?
I believe so.
Where was it financed through?
I'd have to look, but probably, I think it was Bank of America, but I'm not sure.
All right.
Again, let me stop it there. If you lease a car or you're paying installments on your car, you don't know who you're paying? It takes you that long to figure out who you're paying?
Well, and we've, if he sold it, then he had to satisfy an obligation to someone, and he can't remember who he gave that money to also.
He had to drag out of him that he sold it, but he can't remember when he sold it exactly, even though it was just months beforehand. He doesn't know any details about it, doesn't know who had the lease. Let's go back to this.
But also, well, Brian, here's the thing. It was a company car, and he sold it, so certainly he gave the money back to the company because the company had been paying for it, right?
Let's go back to the deposition of Kast Media's Colin Thomson, the cars.
Did you get more out of it than was owed on it when you sold it Q1 24?
Did I get more out of it than was owed on it?
Yes.
Yes.
By how much?
I don't recall the exact number.
Let me stop it there. He sold it for a profit. Somehow. And he still can't remember how much it was months beforehand. When he's about to file for bankruptcy because he's worried about his finances.
Regardless of how much you got when you sold the Mercedes G-Wagon, did you reimburse Kast for its payments of your Mercedes G-Wagon expense?
No.
You pocketed that money from the sale of the Mercedes G-Wagon, correct?
Objection argumentative.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. You kept the money from the sale of the Mercedes G-Wagon. You didn't reimburse. In other words, you didn't reimburse Kast.
So I already said that I didn't reimburse Kast.
All right, and you kept it though, right? As opposed to doing something else with it.
I don't know what you mean.
Like
I didn't reimburse
like pay a debt, pay somebody that you might owe money.
I didn't reimburse Kast.
Nor did you pay any other debt that Kast might have had, correct?
That would have been reimbursing Kast.
Indirectly, right? To pay one of Kast's debts?
That would have been reimbursing Kast.
Well, no. If you think that's what it was, I'll accept that answer. Let's talk about the other vehicles that Kast paid for you. Before we get off of the G-Wagon, how long did Kast make your G-Wagon payment?
I don't remember exactly when. Probably since sometime in 2021.
Okay. Now, the different Mercedes, what kind of Mercedes was that?
The different Mercedes? I believe that was a C series.
And in whose name was the C series Mercedes?
I think it was in my name.
And for what period of time did Kast make the payment on the C series?
I think it would have been probably from maybe 2020 through 2023 or something like that.
And what was the disposition of that?
What was the disposition of that?
Yes.
That was a lease, so the lease ran up.
Was that a lease directly through Mercedes-Benz?
I think so.
And the Tesla. In whose name was the Tesla titled?
I think it was in my name.
And how long did Kast make the Tesla payment on your behalf?
Probably about a year.
When?
From the end of the beginning of 2023 to the end of 2023.
Was that a lease or a purchase?
That was a purchase.
And what was the disposition of the Tesla?
I still have the Tesla.
Is that what you drive in St. Louis?
Yeah, I drive the Tesla.
Well, there it is. I drive the Tesla. I sold the Mercedes. The company was paying for 3 separate cars for this guy.
One of which he still has, and at least one of which he sold for a profit and then pocketed the fund.
And the other one was a lease that he stopped paying in the middle of 23, or it went back. We will find out more about that, and we'll play more audio about this in the future. You get to hear Stephen P. New, 877-50-STEVE. Get even with Stephen, newlawoffice.com. If you're hearing this, it was cleared by Stephen P. New. But there it is. We thought that this guy treated the company like his personal piggy bank. It turns out, in his own words, he did. More to come.
And we have multiple examples of this kind of financial shenanigan, both that we will be airing and or otherwise added to the case.
There's a lot of accountants that he's thrown under the bus, but we'll see what happens.
It's like a bumpy farm road. Try to drive that bus down the street with all those accountants in the way.
I know nothing.
And it's amazing.
I know nothing. It's the accountants. I know nothing.
It's an amazing what some poor accountant that is basically being subpoenaed to testify under oath in a case where somebody is being accused of stealing money. It's amazing how quick those accountants will say, you know what, here's what actually happened. We find that to be a very common occurrence.
NDAs go away very quickly.
They don't want to lose their licenses and shit. See, NDAs don't work in case of shenanigans.
Well, more to come about these shenanigans.
All right, speaking of shenanigans, they got a brand new shenanigan show coming on the air, Brian. Are we going to have to watch another TV show? They're rebooting the American Gladiators. And I don't mean that in a violent kick in the ass kind of way. I mean in a fresh restart with young, fresh faces and a new network of some description. And they're going to have some wrestlers on it this time. Did you hear about this?
Well, this time, I guess you could say almost every time, because the last time they brought it back was maybe a little less than 20 years ago with Hulk Hogan and Layla Ali hosting it. And I think, who was that? Matt Morgan was one of the gladiators, wasn't he?
Matt Morgan was he was gladiator. See, that's an old joke.
Awful,
see, you got
awful, just terrible.
See, I just gave you the punchline without actually giving you the rest of the setup and everything, but you could get it. But yes, Matt Morgan gladiatorified for a while. And that was, I think, 2006-ish, thereabouts.
Yeah, somewhere in that range, yeah.
And of course, the original show from the late 80s, you know, it was one of the phenomenons of syndication for a couple of years. And I remember watching it in, you know, even I was on the road in various hotels, or you'd catch it, late night reruns, whatever. It was syndicated everywhere. And they had the American Gladiators, the good-looking, athletic gladiators who had the spandex outfits. They looked like wrestlers, men and women. And they had, you know, individual gimmick names. I can't remember them all. Fire and Ice and Brimstone.
Turbo.
I don't know what the Turbo.
Laser.
There you go.
Diamond.
Poor Freckles never made it. And he was hell.
Clubfoot really had a rough time.
Clubfoot was another one that had a rough time going over the wall.
But you know what? The original American Gladiators, again, a wrestling connection beyond the one I think you're going to go to. Mike Adamle was one of the commentators, future Raw general manager, and the proof that editing could really make someone seem like a great commentator. He was great on there with Larry Zonka, but at least
now, what did Mike Adamle do in the middle? He was
Mrs.
in
Adamle.
between. No, come on now. In between. Stop it, you prevert. In between American Gladiators and when he actually came to the WWE, he had done some type of legitimate sports, had he not?
I believe he had done commentary. He was a retired football player.
Whatever
And
the case.
it was on in New York. It was on after WWF Superstars on Saturday mornings. So it was kind of, you thought of it almost going with wrestling. It was part of that little block of, there was in 1989 Rock and Roller Games, but American Gladiators was kind of a steady one right after wrestling.
Well, yeah, in 70s, it was wrestling and roller derby. And like late 80s, early 90s, it was wrestling American Gladiators. And you had to, it was like the challenge shows that, you see now where people have to goddamn navigate some kind of obstacle course or climb and succeed in some kind of endeavor to win something. You had to compete against the gladiators. And you mentioned the connection I'm going to make, but Rico Costantino, when he came to OVW, it had been a number of years before that because we met. Rico had 18 careers. He was a cop and a security guard, a paramedic and a bodyguard and a fucking double knot spy, whatever. But he had been one of the contestants on the American Gladiators, and he's one of the only, I think, handful of people that actually won anything because normally the Gladiators just wiped these people out.
I believe Rico may have been actually the very first episode of American Gladiators, like the debut of the series, the pilot, I guess, technically.
Yeah, it may have, as a matter of fact, well, you know better than I do because I'm old now. But so anyway, this has been, the problem was it was a phenomenon at one time and it kind of burned out. It's not like, I think they tried to do some type of live appearances or whatever, but it wasn't like you could take the whole game and the whole show on the road easily.
There's a documentary about American Gladiators that's tremendous because it's kind of in that period of time. Again, early 90s, about what wrestling was doing on the road. And they talk about going on the road and what that was like and all the steroids and everything else. It's really a good...
all the steroids.
No, it's very similar to wrestling of that time. It's very interesting.
But so anyway, the first time around, it was good. Second time, they got network for Hogan and Ali's daughter, right?
They did.
I think, yeah.
I think that was the problem. It's weird to say, but I feel like in a different time when people sat around on weekend mornings and watched TV or local TV, that was perfection for syndicated television. I don't know if it works in 2006 or 2007, whatever it is, versus now. It's a different...
Yeah.
Some things aren't meant for prime time, even though you would think inherently, wow, it's going to be prime time. That'll really give it a big boost. I don't know.
Well, and see, that's the thing is that the first time around in syndication, it was more popular than it was the second time around when it was on network. And now this could be the third time around. And, but now the parameters are so much lower on the amount of viewers that you need or, just everything, because again, as we've talked about, when I was a kid, there was 3 TV stations. They were on the air from 6 a.m. to fucking maybe 1 a.m. And if it was on, it had to be good somehow. Now there's 1,000 stations and there's 14 people watching fucking everything at any given point. So...
No, seriously, sometimes you hear about like some television stations numbers like, fuck, we have more people listening to this than this station that I hear so much about and that
yes.
We don't get time on the CBS morning show. They're plugging their movies and their TV shows all over the place and no one watches.
Hey, but you know what? Shh. We don't want anybody to mess with our shit over here. But that's the point is that now maybe they've hit the sweet spot because I don't think it was ready for that big of an audience 20 years ago for network, but now it still won't be as popular as it was on syndication in the 90s. But the bar is lower, so they may be able to make a go out of it, as the kids say. But here's the cast has had some people in kind of a tizzy because The Miz is going to be the host of this thing. And yeah, I will not deny that I think The Miz's greatest talents lay in hosting game shows. So this is perfect. I'm not going to argue with it a bit. But the cast of gladiators, in addition to whoever else they've got, has 4 people with a connection to pro wrestling.
Oh no, more than that, I think, because I have a thing here.
Do you have? I saw 4. Do you have give me the list?
I have an article from the Hollywood Reporter. Amazon finds its American Gladiators and hires 106 and Park co-host as sideline reporter. This is an exclusive.
What's 106 and Park, by the way?
It's a popular thing for people other than you. It's on BET.
Other than me? Okay, all right.
Gladiators, ready? Amazon Prime Video's American Gladiators reboot has found its gladiators, whom the Hollywood Reporter can first reveal. The new season will feature 16 gladiators, 8 women and 8 men, ages 22 to 38, and standing 5'5" to 6'5", weighing between 140.
Now wait, I'd like to know if any of the men are 5'5" or any of the women are 6'5".
Weighing between 140 and 270 pounds. It's a weird way to look at.
Yeah, just a wide range there. Really, again, those women sound impressive. I'm not sure all the men are.
Picked from across the country. The group includes bodybuilders, pro wrestlers, former Division I athletes, CrossFit champions, and military veterans. The series will be hosted by WWE superstar The Miz, Mike "The Miz" Mizanin. His sidekicks will be the sideline reporter Rossi Diaz, the former co-host of BET's 106 in Park. The Hollywood Reporter has learned exclusively. Sports commentator Chris Rose will be on play-by-play. He hosts NFL Game Day Final on the NFL Network alongside Maurice Jones-Drew. Let me scroll down now. It's just talking about her and him.
Yeah.
The Miz will have 5 professional wrestlers keeping the show's contenders in check. Eric Bugenhagen, a.k.a. Rick Boogs.
This was the guy, and he's apparently a great legitimate athlete.
Yeah.
But that was the guy with the horrible name that was made a stooge for what's he a while back.
And he got hurt, and physically he was as impressive as anyone, and he had a legitimate background, and they gave him a silly comedy thing where he played guitar, I think.
That's right.
Michael Wardlow, a.k.a. Wardlow.
We found him. Where's Wardlow? There's Wardlow.
We thought it was potentially the mountain Darby was climbing. It was actually a mountain of styrofoam that he's waiting to get shot off. But also Jesse Godders, a.k.a. Mr. Pectacular.
Yeah, I've never seen this guy wrestle, I don't think, but I think he lives here in Louisville because I've seen his name affiliated with Ohio Valley Wrestling for years, way back before the West Fabersham people bought him, back when it was still an American product. He's been with OVW for like years and years now, but he was a reality TV show guy. So I guess he's still wanting to do the reality TV.
Here's another name, Jessica Roden, a.k.a. the Ultimate Athlete, J-Rod. I'm not familiar with her, are you?
I've not heard that name.
And Kaylee Latimer, a.k.a. Camille.
Camille!
So we found out what mountain she was on.
Well, we found out what mountain she was buried under. Wardlow and Camille are now going to be on a brand new television program on what network is this, Brian, or service? Or
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Could be a big new TV show that requires you to be big and athletic and compete in a variety of physical endeavors. And Wardlow obviously is on the bigger side. He's probably the 6'5", 275, although Camille is definitely better than 5'5" and 140. So they've been chosen to be American fucking gladiators by this TV company. And look at the putrid physical specimens that are on display on AEW television every Wednesday night. And these two, they couldn't figure out a way to put them on television. And they can't figure out a way now that they're not on their television. They can't get any cross promotion out of it. They can't be saying, oh, look, Wardlow's dominant in our ring and he's also an American gladiator. Because Wardlow is a missing fucking person in AEW. And so is Camille. Because she outshone, apparently, the fucking cash cow, or should I say cash camel, that is Josephine Camel herself, Mercedes Moon. You pay $5 million for a lemon, and you get a bargain on a Fabergé egg, so you toss the egg in the trash, and you put the lemon on TV every week. Bravo. So how is it that the two most famous AEW wrestlers about to be on the roster are, to the average non-wrestling fan, are not even on the television show?
I guess the big question will be, what does Tony do after this? There have been rumors that they have a plan for Wardlow, that he may have gotten hurt again, or
how the fuck? What
there were plans.
What do you think? Is this the American Gladiator Special Olympics version where he can compete in a wheelchair? If he can be a gladiator, why can't he be a pro wrestler?
Well, again, let's see what Tony does after this, and the big question will be Camille. She disappeared. There's a ready-made thing for her to get revenge on Mercedes Moné. But even if you didn't want to do that, there's other things. Will Tony bring Camille back and do something with her after this exposure? And you got to figure Amazon's going to pour a ton in promoting this. And what will their names be? I mean, that's the other thing. Gladiators had names. It says here in the article: Gemini, Lace, Nitro, Zap. Just as 4 examples there. So it's not like it's going to be Wardlow, Camille. It'll be, Fire and Nordic.
I still like fucking Clubfoot.
Clubfoot. Maybe that'll be Wardlow. Maybe he did get hurt. Maybe it'll be Clubfoot. The unexpected Clubfoot.
That was what they called the Inferno that wore the loaded boot.
That was
Frankie
the gimmick.
Kane, but they called him Inferno Clubfoot.
It's the most underrated thing you don't see anymore, the loaded boot. I got to see it a little bit with Tom Pritchard doing it, but like you watch The Grappler even, and that's not Frankie Kane. It's effective and it's cool, and it's an addictive thing. As a fan, you start doing it with your own shit. Like, can I hit my foot like that? What would I be knocking into where?
Yes. Well, do you know in my vault I have Tom Boots?
Tom Boot? I've been looking for him.
I have Tom Pritchard. You son of a bitch. I have Tom Pritchard's boot gimmick.
Oh, no way.
Because see, some of the guys had the loaded boot. They would, they would just load it. It would be in the built up sole, but he didn't have a built up sole. He had a thing he could pull out of his tights and slip it over the toe of his boot with an elastic piece that went around the heel. And then he would do the fucking enziguri with the fucking gimmick on the boot and then take it off the boot. And the referee would be none the wiser.
Well,
so
again, I can't
either
speak.
Wardlow or Camille can have the loaded boot on the Gladiator.
I can't speak to who will be the Clubfoot or if there will be one. But, the other thing that I think hurts it, and we'll see what they do here, but the fact they have a host in The Miz, it could be a host in anybody. It's not about The Miz. That's what worries me, because what originally made it work, one of the things, what made it work is people wanted to try that and do that. I want to try out for that. I wish I could do that. Even kids, I wish there was an obstacle course somewhere like this I could do it. But it was treated really seriously. It's like wrestling. Like Mike Adamle and Larry Zonka called this thing like it was the Super Bowl. Like it was a professional.
Yeah.
There was no like tongue in cheek. There were no skits. There was no host for no reason, really. It was about, we're here at this athletic event in this, you never really thought about it. Like, are they in a warehouse? Where the hell are they? We're here at this thing here in this unnamed location, and we're going to have all these events. And it worked because it was treated seriously. I think the presentation's a large part of it, and the commentators are important, but when you start hearing there'll be a host, it's going to be the Miz hamming it up for the camera, because that's what he does. That's why you hire someone like that, you know? That's what worries me.
I see where you're coming from. Well, it worries me anytime that the Miz is around, but at least it ain't a wrestling show.
I had those toys when they put out American Gladiators toys when I was a kid, and they each came with like a different, I don't know what you would say, different obstacle that they would be in charge of, like shooting the missiles or the javelin or whatever the hell. It was awesome.
What was the name of the impressive looking blonde woman with the statuesque
Bubbles?
No, quit now. No, she had the feathered fan down on 7th Street Road. We're not talking about her. Bubbles and her feathered fan, 3 shows nightly. I'll tell you, Brian, here's the thing. Whether you're going to do 3 shows nightly or 1 show nightly or just sleep 1 time a night, you don't want to just sleep on feathers anymore. You do not want to do that, because back in the old days, they'd pluck a duck or they'd choke a chicken, and they would just take the feathers and they'd shove it in a sheet, and they'd sew the seams up. They'd sew the seams of the sheet, and then you'd have to sleep on that. Sometimes there'd be goose shit or duck doo-doo or chicken caca or whatever in there, and it would drip out through the sack, and then it would, especially if you slept face down, it's just like putting your face right into a chicken sphincter.
This is a bit gross. I don't know where you're going. Are we still talking about American Gladiators?
No, we're talking now about the Helix Sleep mattresses that they've got now, because see, back when I was a child, all you could do was sleep on chicken shit covered fucking feathers wrapped in a dirty sheet.
When you were a child?
And you liked it.
When you were a child?
Yeah, back in those days. See, that's before the people had modern conveniences like Helix. But now that they've got the modern conveniences like Helix, there's no reason in the world not to have a Helix mattress in your own home, because it's not only the best one made today, but also you don't have to leave the house to get it. You don't have to go to one of the stores, and then it's not a big giant thing that it takes 5 people to haul into your house. They knock over your various furniture. They knock over your antiques. They knock over your ceramic goose. It comes in a box. The Helix does, ceramic after goose. You choose it. Yeah, your ceramic goose, it'd break that long neck. Well, and when you get the box of the Helix mattress,
wonderful box,
you can put it right in your home wherever you need it, then take it out of the box, and poof, it becomes. But you can pick. They've got the Elite mattress collection. They've got the Luxe mattress collection. They've got mattresses that cool you down. They got mattresses for the kids. They got mattresses for your mother-in-law. And boy, you ought to see the fucking restraints on those things.
Okay, there are no restraints. They come with no restraint. Let's clear this up. They come with no restraints.
The mother-in-law model was the ball gag. I got a temporary promotion.
Not from Helix. Again, let's talk about the fine products from Helix. I love them here at my house. I have them. My family sleep on Helix mattresses. I know you have them. I was just talking to my buddy G the other day, where he's going to probably get one soon for his daughter. I need to get a new one for my daughter. I choose Helix.
I think you need to take a sip of the decaf and Jim, slow down a little bit.
I choose Helix.
Yes.
Oh no, that just fell. Helix is great.
Well,
tell him, Jim.
While you're picking that up, I'll lay this down, folks. Right now, they got a big 4th of July sale going on early, because it's obviously not the 4th of July yet, but exclusive for the listeners of the Jim Cornette Experience. Starting right now, when you hear this, you can go to helixsleep.com/JCE, 27% off site-wide. Now, that's a pretty stiff daggum discount, stiffer than the normal discounts that we're able to offer. So if you want something stiff in your mattress, then you better
No,
jump right now.
That's not even a good, I don't even know what the hell you're trying to do there. Once again, that is a stiff, or as we say it, a great deal.
Yes.
27% off. And these are great mattresses. We endorse them. We love them. You will love them. And let's just focus on love.
Again, it's the modern times. You don't need to sleep on sacks of chicken shit or, goose dander with miscellaneous wood shavings. You can go for professional or barbed wire. And there's the talk about the asbestos. We've mentioned there's no asbestos in the Helix mattresses. And chloroform is also banned. There's no a lot of mattresses you get these days, you got a chloroform problem. It'll set off your chloroform. You got a chloroform detector in your house, don't you?
Again, there's no problem with Helix, no chloroform problem. These are great.
You'll sleep the natural way.
The natural great way with a natural great mattress. Helix, just for you.
See, that's what a lot of mattresses use to trick you into thinking that they're comfortable and you sleep well. They're soaked in chloroform, but Helix don't have to do that.
Helix does not do that. That's what we're saying.
That's what I'm saying. They don't have to because they're going to put you to sleep. Boom. Just like a tap on the head with a caveman's club.
They won't put you to sleep.
You're going to nod out.
They'll be there to catch you on your way down.
You should lay down first. Lay down first, because if you go to sleep standing up, you never know. You could fall the other way.
Well, Helix will fall the right way, right there for you. Fall on your mattress, go to sleep. Helix Sleep. Jim. Oh, you hear that? You know what that means.
Yes, I know what that means.
Yeah.
HelixSleep.com/JCE. The big 4th of July sale early right now. 27% off site-wide. HelixSleep.com/JCE. I've got one more little classic wrestling thing, and then we're going to go to the projectile blood spewing and the vowel movement that they have every Wednesday on AEW. But we've talked about the Pioneer Wrestling Television, and we talked earlier about the Pioneer Wrestling gates and crowds and, money that guys used to make. And we've mentioned on the program also here when we talk about the Chicago payoffs or the St. Louis payoffs. Look at this. Brian, Harley Race, and Dick the Bruiser got $6,000 each in St. Louis. That's like $23,000 today or whatever. And yeah, they were big national stars and these were major markets and they were figured in main events. They were very well used, but I know a lot of the fans, they hear the stories of, well, back in the territory days, the wrestlers didn't make, because all the wrestlers say, we didn't make any money. We were underpaid and we were screwed around. And a lot of that is true. But the thing, there was money to be made in wrestling and some people made it. As I think everybody, it's not an inflammatory statement to make that everybody can agree that sometimes many of the boys were their own worst enemies when it came to, if not making any money, saving any money. A lot of times part of it was taxes as an independent contractor, paying estimated taxes 4 times a year and keeping your records and etc. That's what the downfall for a lot of guys was. And it is true that a lot of guys, either got screwed on payoffs or didn't make any appreciable big money. And sometimes it wasn't their own making, but sometimes it was just that they never got the spot or the opportunity to get in where there was consistency, because that's the thing for territory wrestling, especially for the promoters and the wrestlers. Consistency was the key to making money. Just a different kind of consistency. With the promoters, even if you didn't have a major market like Chicago or Dallas or New York or whatever, you could make money in territory wrestling if you had towns that were consistent, that year in, year out over time, you knew that you were going to sell between X and Y number of tickets. Example, Tennessee territory, Louisville, Kentucky The biggest wrestling crowd in Louisville of the Jarrett territory era was 6,500 people, because that's how much the Gardens held when it was sold slap dab out. The biggest wrestling crowd in Louisville of all time up until the modern Attitude Era Wars was like 9,000 back in the days before they did the renovations on the Gardens, when it was still the Armory and they could jam them in the 50s. And that doesn't place anywhere near, the top 20 or 30 markets for big 5-figure wrestling crowds. But the thing about Louisville was it ran 52 weeks a year, and they sold between 150 and 200,000 tickets a year. You could count on 3,000 people. You could do between 3,000 and 4,000. Many of those years a little bit better. And then it tailed off at the end. But you see what I'm saying, Brian, for consistency, if you had 5 towns in your territory that you knew were going to sell 75,000, 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 tickets a year, what the fuck, right? That's, as a promoter, when you could establish that, you made your money. And the wrestlers, their consistency was, what ate you up then was moving all the time. You paid your own expenses, but if you only got to run underneath in a particular territory for 3 months, and especially if you were married or you had to give up an apartment and get a U-Haul and move shit to a place, it wasn't worth going. Even 6 months in some places. That's what the bigger territory jobs, not only because they had more towns and bigger markets, but also because you got a longer run in a territory that ran more towns, that either wasn't weekly, or even in the case of the old Carolinas territory, a lot of those towns were weekly, but they ran 2 or 3 towns a night. So that could stretch out before you wore out your welcome. And the real money, as we've talked about, came to be made when you got over in a territory as a babyface or a heel, whatever, so well, and you were so important that you could homestead, as they used to say, and you could stay there like a Nick Bockwinkel working for Vern Gagne for 20 years, or, Jerry Lawler in Memphis, or etc. That consistency, you didn't have to move and uproot your family. You didn't have to pay moving costs and get in and out of apartments or houses or whatever. If you got a good spot in a good territory where you were figured in and you could stay for long periods of time, that was the consistency for the boys, right? So even if you weren't a star, you could prosper. One more thing I'll say, and then we'll get into the topic of what I'm going to talk about. Yes, you hear a lot of times the guys said, oh, fuck, I didn't make any money, or they didn't fuck me on the payoffs or whatever. And all of those things that I've just mentioned can be true. But also remember, the boys liked cars, and the boys, remember in the Mid-South, the boys liked that gold jewelry that was all the rage. The boys liked some of that white fucking powder that was all the rage too. Or the boys didn't pay their taxes because they didn't understand it. I was lucky. My cousin Larry already had a company. When I first got in wrestling, he put me with his accountant so that I knew about paying estimates and doing the whole thing. But if you looked at the positives of what of the territory you were in, what your potential was, what your spot was, etc., and were kind of halfway paying attention to what you were doing, you could make a lot of money in the wrestling business. And the same thing as a promoter, you didn't have to be a billionaire to be a promoter. You didn't have to be a national TV star with a major guaranteed contract to make money in wrestling. That's what I lament is missing. Not only that you can't be a normal human and be a promoter anymore, but you can't really be a normal human and be in a wrestling business anymore as a talent. If you're not aspiring to have a contract with one of the national companies, you're not going to make any fucking money. Brian, I've laid this premise down. Would you like to know what I'm talking about now?
I'm very curious, yeah.
I looked at, because here's another thing I was just fiddling around. We talk about how the national stars made money in the territory days, the big payoffs, and a blah, blah, blah. But I said, let's just think about somebody that most people don't think of as a guy that made a ton of money or main evented in Madison Square Garden or whatever in a wrestling business, Bill Dundee. And I was just looking at this because I worked in this territory, worked for Dundee when he was the booker of this territory. I know what payoffs were. I've talked to all of my guys. And I kind of know, even Dundee himself doesn't know how much money he made in 1977 at this point. It's 50 fucking years ago. He ain't kept that shit. Probably remembers he got fucked around. But in 1977, as we've documented, he made $6,000 for 2 matches, those 2 hair matches with him and Beverly. Okay, the average median income for a family in the United States in 1975 was $11,800 a year. So he made $6,000 in 2 nights in 1977. There was still money to be made in wrestling. And with the consistency and with being figured in, I sat down and I said, okay, what would one of these modern wrestlers say to a promoter if he basically pitched the deal that Dundee had in the Memphis territory with Jerry Jarrett for 9 years, from start of January 75 to December 1983. Dundee never left the territory. Well, summer of 83 for 6 weeks, go to Georgia. And while he was there, pretty much for the entire time, he was figured in as a main event guy, first as a heel, later as a babyface, often in a tag team, lots of times as a single. And he became one of the guys that was, recognized one of the legends of Memphis wrestling, right? Everybody saw Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Jimmy Valiant, Fargo, the Fabs, that type of company. So what do you think, Brian? You're a young wrestler and you can't get the national TV contract with the WWE or the Lollipop Guild, but a promoter says, I tell you what, I'm going to bring you in and I'm going to have you work for me. And I'm going to use you in a top spot for the next 9 years. You're going to be a babyface. You're going to be a heel. You're going to work 6 days a week. You're going to wrestle 6 nights a week, but no trip is going to be over 250 miles. You're only going to spend 1 night a week in the hotel. Other nights, you're going to be home every night, especially because we're going to run the town that you're living in once a week. You're never going to get on an airplane. You're never going to have to. You can buy a house in Nashville, Tennessee, and you can live there for 9 years. You'll have every Sunday off most of the time. You're going to be on TV every week, 52 weeks a year, and it's broadcast television in every market, so you're going to be a celebrity in the whole area. The girls are going to love you in every town. Eventually, I'm going to make you the booker, the matchmaker, and you're going to call the shots. And also, you can sell your own pictures and keep the money off of that. I don't care. You're going to work with the best talent in the business. In Dundee's case, he came over from Australia, never having been pushed over there at all, and immediately got a push and worked with everybody from Jerry Lawler to Nick Bockwinkel to Billy Robinson to fucking Andre, whatever. And then I said, at the end of that time, I'm going to get you a higher paying job as the booker of a bigger territory. And in those 9 years, I'm going to pay you the equivalent of about $2.5 million. Would that be a fucking deal? Why would you as a wrestler turn that down?
Depends how ambitious you are. Again, we're talking then versus now. I think it's a pretty good deal. I mean, also, how many not to talk about Bill Dundee, but how many wrestlers like Len Rossi moved to the area? Not that it was a big business thing, but he was allowed to have his side business.
Yeah.
It wasn't like wrestling was his only thing. He had his health food store for 50 years or whatever. Again, you don't have to do that. You can do anything. And nowadays you can make money in a whole bunch of ways. But that was another thing, was if you are going to really set up and move in, if you're ambitious, you can do everything from sell cars to sell insurance to open up your own store to do whatever.
But and to be honest, there wasn't a lot of time. And Lynn Rossi established that. And then, much of it was after he retired. You didn't have a lot of time. You were working 6 days a week. But the whole business model, because the economics were different. But as I said, the median family income in 1975 was $11,800 a year. I guarantee you, Bill Dundee in 1975 working, and that's when Nick Goulas was still making a lot of the payoffs because they hadn't split with Jarrett yet. But I know from not only talking to Dennis Condrey, he and Phil Higgerson were a top team in Memphis and in the Goulas circuit and in Knoxville in the mid-late 70s. And payoffs, the top heels are going to make $700-800 a week max probably in those days. But $35,000 in 1975 equals over $200,000 in today's money. And I know when I was there, the payoffs that I was getting, as in 1982, the median family income, by the way, Brian, for a family was $23,430. When I started as the lowest paid guy on the roster and the flunky manager, I started out making the median family income in my first fucking job. So I know that if I was making $400 a week, then Bill Dundee, the main event guy and the booker, was making $1,200, right? I'm not saying he was making $5,000 a week in the Tennessee territory. But that was the thing, is if you made $1,000, $1,200 a week in those days in a territory that size, $60,000 in 1983 is almost $200,000 in today's money. And then you're selling pictures. We've talked about the picture sales. And so you had a guy, that's when Jerry Jarrett called me in the first day at Channel 5 when he said, "Hey kid, you want to be a manager?" Dundee was the booker. Dundee was in the room. And part of Jarrett's pitch was, he said, sometimes wrestling doesn't work out, but you can make a lot of money in a wrestling business. He said, Bill's a wealthy man and I've made a fortune. And both of those were true. Dundee wasn't a millionaire owning a goddamn construction business, as Jarrett was later on. But he had a fucking house and he had a fucking high-paying job in a home area that he was figured in, and it lasted for a long period of time.
Did Dundee save?
I don't think he was an Angelo Poffo, but at the same time, he's had businesses after he got out of the business, and he wasn't out there. Dundee wrestled independence because Dundee would rather wrestle than take a shit in the morning. He just wanted to get in the ring and do shit. So, but I think he was fairly smart with things. But that's the point, is you had the opportunity, and getting in the office or becoming a booker or things like that, that was the path. If you got settled, that was the next step. And that's why I never thought, I'll say this and it will bring this to a fucking close, but I never thought that I was going to work anywhere else besides the Memphis territory. And that's why, when you see everybody that thinks, oh gosh, the WWE was their dream and they always wanted to go there. And I'm not knocking the WWE when I say this, I'm just, because it's the biggest company. When Jerry Jarrett said to me, "Hey, do you want to be a manager?" Holy shit, yes, I do. But at that point, I never actually thought I would go anywhere else. And think about, in those days, how Bobby Heenan started and stayed in Indianapolis for 10 years. Jimmy Hart had been, at that point, that I was having that conversation. I've been managing in Tennessee for 3. I'd grown up with managers like Sam Bass always being there. The managers in the Northeast, Albano and the Wizard, they were always. So I thought, if I work really hard, get good at this, and impress them, then this is where I will be in the wrestling business. I didn't think that anybody else would really particularly want me. Why the fuck would any other promoter want me, is what I was thinking at the time. But I still didn't think it was like a short-term fling, because I intended to not only be the best manager I could, so I'd stay here like Bobby Heenan did in Indianapolis, but at some point, yeah, the thought was there, I can promote towns. I've already been postering for Teeny. I could promote spot shows like Buddy Wayne. I could open up this town, whatever. That was kind of like a thing where I always thought I would be here, but I didn't just think I would be doing one thing. Does that make sense, Brian?
It makes a lot of sense. And I guess the question I have, you're talking about money in the wrestling business. When Jerry Jarrett has that conversation for you and you're excited and you're, of course, wanting to do it, like, when did you realize you're going to lose the picture money? Because you were making a living in the wrestling business,
yeah.
But it wasn't like, you didn't do that when you became a heel manager. You had to stop at a certain point, right?
Well, remember, it was gradual, because here's the thing. I couldn't shoot ringside anymore, so that knocked me out of the magazine business, but I was still doing the pose stuff downstairs in the locker room at the Gardens. I just took my backdrop and all my equipment and stuck it down there. The lighting wasn't quite as good, so I had a little bit more shadow problem, but I was still doing that, where I had to give up. And then when I was not only still doing the pictures for the merchandise table, but also managing and had the program managing Adrian against Dundee, Jesus Christ, I was having $1,000 weeks. And as we've just established, that's like $3,000 a goddamn week today. But when I went to Georgia, when I was shipped to Georgia, because everything that's booked up must be booked down, that's when I had to give up doing the pictures, because I was in fucking Georgia. And I couldn't be there every week to take them and get them printed and pick them up and deliver them and all that stuff. So that's what I was doing just fine from October until June of 83. And then July through November of 83 was when I was starving, because now I wasn't doing the pictures at all. And after the Georgia run, which we've talked about so many times, I came back, was on all the spot shows, making $50 3 or 4 times a week. So then Louisiana was what saved the day. But at that point, that was when I lost the pictures. Beforehand, it was just lovely. I just had to do 3 different jobs, but I was making wonderful money for a 21-year-old fella. But that's the point is, I've just used Dundee as an example because I worked in this territory. I know the payoffs. I know the other guys that made money, and I could extrapolate for what Dundee was making when he was more important than me and also the booker. But you get the point that between $35,000 and $75,000 in the 1970s and early 80s is the equivalent of goddamn anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 or whatever in today's money per year. And there were multiple guys in the business all over the country that had a spot as good, almost as good, or even better. Nick Bockwinkel made $150,000 a year working like 15 days and took out shots if he wanted to. And that was 45 fucking years ago.
And again, the overall economy and the value of a dollar and the strength of the middle class is a completely different animal today versus then. I mean, that was, a comfortable living was kind of a perfect living in a lot of ways. And now it's a bigger struggle. The price of everything is more. Because,
there were guys that the NWA champions and Bruno and guys that gave up schedules that were making tons more money than that back then because they didn't want to work that hard. There was no quality of life. They couldn't take it anymore. But if you got a territory, got a nice little spot, you were living pretty fucking good, and you were a celebrity and all that other stuff, whichever you liked the best out of everything. And it was more accessible to people without either just being a cog in the wheel where you're signed to a contract for a guaranteed amount of money for a few years and then you don't know what's going to happen, or spending your life in obscurity. There was much more potential for reasonable success without having to be a goddamn movie star. You didn't have to be on national TV to make money, and you didn't have to be a billionaire to promote wrestling back in the good old days.
Well, you would make a fortune.
You could make a single person's fortune. I'm not even talking about unmarried person. I'm talking, you could make a normal individual's fortune, not a fucking fortune for a major corporation. I like it when we had to pull each other up by our own jock straps and stick the balls in our mouth and head out to work every day. All righty. Would you like to stick some balls in your mouth and head over to AEW?
I'm not going to say yes to that. So that's all you. That's all you, Diddy.
Well, no, because I'm telling you, we need to get a ball gag for poor Kenny, because if his diverticulitis is going to cause him to do this every week, we need to stick something in his mouth so he doesn't spread.
Well, again, I don't know where your mind goes, but why don't we do a clean one here so we can use it on YouTube, and let's talk about AEW Dynamite that just took place wherever they were.
Well, I don't even know now what's been edited out, but folks, it was filthy, whatever it was. But they were over there. Where were they this week? They were out on the West Coast.
This. Yeah, where were they? They were in Portland. Was it Portland?
Well, it's a shame. But what, again, I'm just saying that somebody needs to do something for poor Kenny to keep this thing from happening again. It looks like his irritable bowel syndrome is still with him. But they started out, that was June 11th is what it was on Dynamite, with the long-awaited rematch between Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. And we know what's been going on over the past several weeks is Ospreay's trying to get Swerve and Paige to be on the same page so that they can all band together and fight Moxley, because this is our last chance. We all have to work together. Even though that none of the baby faces ever accomplish anything except pissing all over each other. And meanwhile, this fucking decrepit world champion they've got just goes and then chokes out the remains afterwards. But nevertheless, the story is not the match here. The story is the overdone goddamn finish and afterbirth and a continuing, I don't know what. They started the thing with a Western swing dancing routine, and it's a 4-hour show because they're doing the AEW Dynamite and Collision doubleheader. And I knew this was going to take a while, so I thought I'd just skip ahead to the finish because that's where we get to the meat of the matter. Because let's face it, folks, if you like this kind of thing, this is the kind of thing you like. But I went 25 minutes ahead and I'm like, what in the world? Are they going to go an hour? And I stopped at about 25 minutes in and they were trading forearms. It figures. So apparently the announcers are now mentioning, well, we've only got a few minutes remaining in the time limit. So my God, they're going to go 30 minutes. At 28 minutes, Ospreay hit Swerve Strickland with both of his finishers, one after another. The fucking elbow thing, and then where he picks the guy up and spins him around and drops him on his head thing. 2 count. And I've already mentioned that Swerve had his chance. He's not nearly as over as he used to be, although they love the chant. But good God, if they could have just cleared the path for Ospreay to go to the stadium and beat this fucking idiot and win that title, you might have something. Ospreay, whether it's his own doing or whether people are trying to sabotage him, I don't know who's calling all this, but they're wearing the new off of him quick, Brian. They are just beating the fucking they're wearing out the new car smell. They're putting dings on his body. So after Swerve kicked out of both of Ospreay's finishes, they grabbed a hold and laid there for a while because apparently they're early on their timing. They were supposed to be at a certain place at a certain time, and they still had more time left. So they laid there for a while. Then Ospreay milked whether or not that he should give Swerve the Tiger Driver. Like that's worse than any of the other goddamn goofy-ass dangerous shit they do to each other. Oh, Lord, throwing him off the stage through the exploding table, well, that's one thing, but goddamn, don't give him that fucking Tiger Driver. So he's deciding whether he should do that, and then he tried to do it, but his arm gave out. And then Swerve gave Ospreay a big move on his head. And then he gave Ospreay the kick to the head. But then Swerve, who was just on offense for two big moves, gave him a big move on his head, jumped up, ran across the ring, gave him the kick in the head. Then he laid there selling too. Selling what? You just kicked the guy in the fucking head. And they both rolled to the apron. See, this is key. They got to be on the apron. And then Swerve took forever. And when I say forever, if anybody wants to go back and watch this and put a stopwatch on it, you might need a sundial. Because he knows that he's got to be up on top when the bell rings. And so he's taken forever to get up there, and poor Ospreay has to sit there on the apron in position to take the double stomp, which is just roll away. Just roll away. But as Swerve is standing on the top rope and Ospreay is there waiting to be beaten by his goddamn finish, the double stomp off the top onto the apron, the bell rings and it's a 30-minute draw. Now, bear in mind, both of them should have been counted out of the ring, and it should have been over a minute before that when they were both laying on the apron, but that wasn't the finish they'd figured, so the referee was helpless. And and also, by the way, it made you realize that even more because the announcers were talking about how much time had expired and how much time was left, and while they were laying on a fucking apron, it wasn't a 10 count, it was a minute and a half count. So the point is, now what we've got is a situation where Ospreay has given this guy his best shit, can't beat him. And the way we left the draw was that Swerve was about to execute him, but the bell rang before he could chop his head off. Is that the way that you make your alleged top babyface in any way attractive to the public, Brian?
I was thinking that's kind of a disappointing finish, all things considered. It's a bit of a letdown. And then they somehow made it a whole lot worse, it seemed, for those fans with the post-match. I'll say my least favorite thing has become Swerve's, I guess, the most prominent one where you see it because it takes him a little while. It did here. But, other people do the move, but it was so bad here with Ospreay, where the guy's going for the stomp and the downed opponent can't be down because they'll die if the guy lands on them with their feet.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of lean up a little bit to kind of cushion the blow. But it was taking so long, so 3 different times, Ospreay's like sitting up like the Undertaker in slow motion. And he's just sitting there, like a great ab workout, but it took so long, and I don't like that. Because you don't sell anything else like that.
Stare up.
Yeah, there's nothing else that is sold like that. There's nothing else where all of a sudden you're leaning up and coming back to life and just waiting there in suspended animation for Swerve to come stomp you. And the fans there liked it, the match, until the finish.
They did. They booed the draw. They booed the finish.
Until the finish, they liked it. It's that kind of thing. But how is this helpful in any way? 2 baby faces wrestling this match, doing everything, a half hour. And again, Ospreay, for a while, it was Swerve never wins. Now it's Ospreay never wins.
Well, hold on, because Ospreay's going to look a whole lot stupider and worse here in a minute. Because now remember, I'm checking my notes. When last we saw Ospreay take any punishment, Swerve gave him the big move on his head and the kick to the head. And then they both sold, and then Swerve went to the top rope. So the last minute and a half, Ospreay was selling. Well, then Swerve gets on the fucking mic. And he wants a restart. He wants more time. He wants sudden death. And Ospreay's rolled out on the floor, and he's selling, but he's looking. You get a camera shot of Ospreay looking at Swerve. He's cognizant. He's conscious. And Swerve saying, I feel like shit, and I know you do too, but if you're the man I think you are, you're going to want sudden death. And you see Ospreay hear this, and then the music plays. And here come Dick the Boozer and the Boar Horseman, slowly and boringly walking through the arena. Swerve is in the ring. Ospreay's still on the floor. And we're not going to see Ospreay for a while. Because as the Moxley bunch surrounds the ring, all of a sudden, into the ring from behind Swerve come the Cucamonga Kids, the Hardley Boys, the Lollipop Guild, Maddie and Nikki. And they jump on Swerve and they super kick Nana one time and he's dead. You'll never see him again. And then they handcuff Swerve to the ropes in the corner while Moxley is on the floor for some reason making goofy faces just at random. And then the Buckaroos super kick Swerve several times. And then they get a duffel bag. I think from Wheeler Useless. And they pulled out tennis shoes with thumbtacks on the bottom of them. And then these guys, and they're taking forever. They have to take their regular shoe off and put the thumbtack shoes on. And then they go for the super kick on Swerve with the thumbtack shoes. Bear in mind, from the time that the previous match was over, it's been 4 minutes. And before that, Ospreay was selling for a minute and a half, right? We established that before the end of the match. But we also saw him looking at Swerve in a state of consciousness when Swerve was challenging him. Ospreay just jumps in right at this point and stands up in front of Swerve, and they kick him with the thumbtack shoes. So he's been sitting on the floor for 4 minutes watching all this shit go on and just then jumped in. And then the Bucks, and they act like, oh, should we have done that? And the doctor jumps in and puts a fucking washcloth over Ospreay's face because the announcer said, oh my God, Ospreay's gushing blood. No, he's not. Because it's a fake kick with fake shoes, and the doctor put the fucking cloth over his face so you could see it was fake, or you couldn't see it was fake. And the fans are chanting, fuck the Bucks. They're not even trying to censor fuck anymore now on TBS. And in the middle of all this, Moxley's bunch just disappeared. They never did anything, and they were never referred to again. And by the time all this was over with, the match and all that bullshit, we were 45 minutes into the show. So, Brian, what... After Ospreay does everything and can't beat the guy, and then the guy's ready to kill Ospreay, and the only thing that saves him is the bell. And then Ospreay rolls out on the floor and lets all this other shit go on with these other fucking heels before he jumps in to sacrifice himself. Fuck, he could have called 911 from the floor and the cops would have been there quicker, and he rolled in. And then they do a fake angle and they take him out with a goddamn cloth over his face so you can't see that the thumbtack soled tennis shoes that he was kicked with are phony. What'd you think?
Again, the match was the match. The post-match went on forever. As soon as they start playing that music, it's kind of perfect for the Death Riders because it's just lazy, like lazy guitar. Nobody wants to hear it. No one reacts to them coming out there. And then the Bucks, somehow the Bucks are even less over than the Moxley crew. And the stupid thing with the super kicks, how long did that go on? One after another. Why is Swerve standing up? Why does Swerve keep standing up to set himself up to be kicked in the face? Stay down.
Turn around and stick your ass up in the air.
I know you're handcuffed, but like, don't stick your chin up. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, I don't know. They're trying to make their heels really strong going into that big event. The problem is they got the wrong heels. And all the baby faces fight each other.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. The only people that baby faces can beat are each other. And they always lose everything. Well, but, they got one of the legendary baby faces from Mexico coming to help them out, Brian. I was glad to see this. This will take care of the problem. They'll be selling out those NBA arenas again in no time. Because Mystico now in AEW on television. He wrestled here. This guy's name, Blake the Christian. He was accompanied by John the Baptist.
No, he's Blake Christian, not Blake the Christian. He's Blake Christian. I don't remember who he was accompanied by.
Wasn't John the Baptist?
It may actually. I can't say it wasn't because I don't remember who it was.
Okay, Brian, you may be more up to date on the lucha scene, but is Mystico normally more impressive than this, or is this where he's at right now?
Mystico is a big star, was one of the most successful draws in Arena Mexico history. Had that run as Sin Cara, which MJF later brought up, did not go over well. Even though they seemingly wanted him to. Again, it was during the Vince era, so nothing really worked right at all. But he needs the right opponent and he needs the right setting. You could take the most over Japanese wrestler ever, whoever that may be at different points, and just put him in the middle of a random match on a random wrestling show. It may not work. I don't think it was terrible. But again, if you want to showcase the guy, it should be 3 minutes, look spectacular, do one really amazing thing, not everything you're going to do in the match with MJF at Arena Mexico, and win. But
also, I mean, this wasn't too long. It was brief, but it was like, again, he did his, he had a match like he's a goddamn giant star for the audience that's seeing him, rather than, who the fuck is this guy? He's on pay-per-view next month. We got to get him over. He didn't go out there to get over with a new audience. He went out there to have the match that he has where he's not going to get hurt and he's going to beat this guy fairly handily.
Well, did you hear how they were talking about him? They were talking about it was Mil Mascaras coming in.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is they're putting Mystico over as, my God, the legend. Oh my God, he's here. And you're just seeing a guy that he's not as impressive as Bandito or Gravity or Helium or any of these other fucking guys. He's just walking through some shit. I'm not saying, I know a lot of people, I want to make sure I make this clear, because a lot of people are saying, well, goddamn Cornette, make up your mind. He's not supposed to have the main event of Starrcade 86 with this guy. No, I'm not saying. There's two different things between having a long competitive match and working with a guy as a job guy where you're not trying to get over. He wasn't, if this is his impressive shit, he ain't as impressive as fucking Bandito or Vikingo or whatever. It would seem to me if they're trying to get Mystico over, then he should come out working to fucking get over. He Okada'd this thing. He sleptwalked through it. He just did the shit that he needs to do. It wasn't long. He won, but he didn't stand out as he's not as impressive as our friend Frank Mortis. So it was nice if you know that he's a big deal, but he wouldn't become a big deal to you from this, I guess is what I'm saying. But nevertheless, they're going to hoke it up more anyway, because after the match is over, here comes the Hurt Syndicate. And there was kind of some staring and etc. And finally MVP spoke up and pitched it to MJF, and MJF cut a promo on Mystico The fans are booing the shit out of him. I guess they were happy at that point finally to see a fucking heel. But the whole thing now is MJF said, I'm going to unmask you in Mexico, and I'm going to be wearing the red, white, and blue. And he shoots the confetti off and drops the flags and the streamers, the red, white, and blue. The United States is such heels to the rest of the world right now. The fans of the United States are booing the fucking flag. This is a goddamn bizarro. Anyway.
I think they were booing MJ. MJF got booed out of the building more than we've seen.
Well, yes, but you could, that's the thing is you can now use the American flag to get heat as a fucking heel. We've come this far as a country. And then Mystico snatched the microphone away from him and spoke broken English in the voice of the mayor of Munchkinland. He literally sounded like Billy Barty. Do you remember that name? Look him up, kids.
Yeah.
Billy Barty.
Sigmund the Sea Monster.
Yeah. He sounded like this. He sounded like he was talking like the little people.
He was in the movie Body Slam. And he was in UHF, Noodles Macintosh.
And so we've again, yes, if it's for Mexico, that's great. But on United States television, we're trying to, MJF, who's trying to be in the top heel group here, is having a promo battle with the mayor of Munchkinland who's speaking Spanish to him. That's where MJF called him Sloppy Sin Cara. And then Mystico hits MJF and the Hurt Syndicate jumps him and they're going for the mask. But here comes Kevin Knight, Hong Kong Phooey, and Masquerita Dorito. And the heels have to roll to the floor. The baby faces, all three of them, they hit the far ropes and they get off kilter, but they're doing a triple dive and they dive on everybody. And Dorito, by the way, replaced the other guy, a Commander? Was that who was supposed to be in this six-man?
Commander was one of the international killers in this group.
Yes. Well, he got killed domestically because he got injured for real. So instead of just saying the guy's injured and Dorito's going to take his place, they had the Hurt Syndicate video of him jumping Commander in the back, but beating him up, he's already down type phony shit. Tony, in his mind and the way that things have to be in order in his mind, he couldn't just announce that this guy that nobody gives a shit, that's in this cold six-man and nobody gives a shit about, we're going to substitute him because he's hurt. They have to do a phony angle to explain it. So then they've done the dives, and then all six guys wandered around for a while, and they started the six-man tag. The Hurt Syndicate, Lashley, Benjamin, and MJF against who I dubbed the Squirt Syndicate. Hong Kong Phooey, Kevin Knight, and Dorito. And I think they've jumped the shark finally with the Hurt Syndicate. I mean, part of this, it could have been okay if they just beat these fucking little shit balls up and get some heat. They'd started beating the shit out of them at the beginning. MJF, by the way, dressing in the MVP style tights. That looks good. It shows him being a part of the group but still he's individual. It's an homage, whatever. But at one point, they had to let these goofballs take over, and these guys are not ready to handle this. And they shit the bed. At one point, mostly MJF sold toward the beginning and to the middle of the match. But did you see the part where Kevin Knight had MJF going, and he reached to the corner to tag Hong Kong Phooey? But Hong Kong Phooey jumped into the ring and walked over to him and tagged his partner while he was standing there in the ring because he was so intent on turning MJF around to shoot him off in the direction he was supposed to go for the next spot. He got into the ring, walked over to his partner, and tagged him. How do you do that if you've been in wrestling school for 2 weeks?
Even the young bucks don't do that.
That shouldn't even work in your brain. I don't.
That's true. When have you ever seen anyone do that?
Well, it's like if I got up today and said, I'm going to go walk on some water. I just wouldn't.
You know, the end of this match, specifically the stuff with Kevin Knight and Speedball working with Shelton and Bobby, fell apart. It completely fell apart. And if you watched, it looked like, I don't want to name names, but it looked like a couple of guys had routines in their head that they had already figured out how it was going to work out, and the other guy may not have realized it.
Yes, and or did not executed what was in their head properly. I don't know. Well, okay. Again, the match made no sense to put together to be competitive with these baby faces when you've got all your stars in one basket here. And then there was a point where MJF had been selling, and he rolled and dove and made a hot tag to Lashley. But of course, there was not a peep because heels can't make a hot tag. That's not even a thing that happens. But he did it, and then MJF rolled to the floor. So Spitball and Knight got in against Lashley and Benjamin, and while they just started a 4-way while the referee was staring at him, and the babyface's partner Dorito was on the apron staring at this. But the Hurts were beating the shit out of the two babyfaces while the other babyface was on the apron watching. If you're going to do a 4-way in a 6-man tag and the referee's going to stand there and watch it, then what is preventing the other babyface from coming in? Because you're already doing shit without a tag. So why would the babyface stay? Oh, there's only 2 heels in the ring, so even though they're fucking pulling my partner's balls off and shoving them down their throat, I can't get in. It's against the rules. What the fuck? Then MJF asked to tag back in against Spitball and hit a big move on him and got a 2 count. What is wrong with these people? This fucking little child kicking out on MJF. Then they bumped MJF out again. And then Spitball was doing the little goofy ballet kicks with Lashley. And then that's when Fooey and Kevin Knight tried to do a double team spot where Lashley was in the corner and Hong Kong was going to alley-oop Kevin Knight over his head, and he was going to catch Lashley in a double T or in a DDT is what I'm trying to say. But he went up over fucking Fooey, and when he landed, he missed the grip and they fucking stuff. So he just drugged Lashley down on top of his head. And then Shelton grabs Spitball and gives him a German suplex, but the little dork did a flip and land on his feet. And as Shelton stood up and turned around, Knight was going to jump up and drop kick him. At least that's what I think it was, because that's what Shelton was bracing for.
That's what it looked like.
But at the last second, Knight didn't do anything. He jumped up and kind of stuck his leg up, but he didn't throw a leg out. He wasn't anywhere close enough to Shelton to hit him with a knee. He just jumped straight up in the air. Shelton is already turning, putting his hand up to take the drop kick, and he's already starting to lean backwards. So when he realizes that the fucking guy didn't hit him with anything, he stumbled backwards on his ass and spun back up, and then they hit him with a double drop kick. So then, bear in mind, the referee has stood stark, staring, slack-jawed, watching this 4-way for minutes with no tags. And now you look on the wide shot, Dorito has just gone down on the floor. He's standing on the floor, not even participating through this whole thing. And MJF has completely disappeared. And so now the Hurt Syndicate looks like stumblebums working with these non-working botch children. And then The two baby faces do a dive, and suddenly then Dorito jumps up from the floor, runs across the ring, jumps up to the top, and dives on MJF on the other side, who was doing nothing to anybody and hadn't been seen for 5 minutes. And then Spitball went up to the top, and MVP gets up from commentary and hits him with his cane and knocks him off the top rope, and MJF hits the DDT 1, 2, 3. This is why, even if they get good talent, if they sign good talent in AEW, or if some talent just accidentally starts getting over, they still can't draw with it because they can't pick talent to face it. And they always put the star in a position where they are devalued by the indie children running rampant. And the fact that the manager of Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, and in MJF, the Hurt Syndicate, would have to interfere and use his cane to fuck this small, child-sized dork. This should have been a job match with underneath baby faces, which they are, to get the Hurt Syndicate ready to draw some money somehow with somebody else you can buy as a top main event guy or guys. But instead, if they need to cheat to beat this twink, then how are they to be taken seriously against real fucking wrestlers? So it was a good run, Hurts. It must have been love, but it's over now.
All right. Well, that was.
Oh, hold on. No, there's more. There's more. There's more. Because then the Hurt started beating up the baby faces after the match. Too little, too late. And they take Dorito's mask off, and everybody, oh, that's terrible. And then Mystico runs in. And again, while Lashley and Benjamin are on the floor 10 feet away, instead of Mystico running in and fucking pickling MJF with something just to get a little something for their match, he's got to spin around MJF and take him down in his arm bar and start cranking the arm bar to where Shelton and Bobby have to flummox instead of getting in and grabbing the guy, and then Mystico runs off. After all of that. So, what the fuck? What the actual fuck is wrong with these people? And I'm not, Kevin Knight, start him off at the bottom as a preliminary guy, give him a year where he loses most but wins a few, but then he starts winning more than he loses, and then something happens and he gets involved in something. You got a talent. Dorito is the same or not as good as 10 other interchangeable lucha guys that they've already got. And Hong Kong Phooey, you couldn't bet on him in a fight with a lingerie model. Just because he's a nice guy in the locker room or somebody's impressed with his fucking gymnastic ability, I'm sorry, he's an insult to a professional wrestling program. But this is their stars. What the fuck is the matter with these people, Brian?
I don't know. The Hurt Syndicate in a weird place where they kind of just do things amongst themselves and every now and then beat other people. It may take a while like this did, but there's no feud. You know, maybe they'll get behind the idea they're there to help MJF get the world title. He was there to help them. They're already tag team champions, just to help them, I guess. But there's no, they're not working with anyone. There's no feud. There's no.
Who is there?
I mean, they kind of teased this last week with the International Killers, and then Commander went away, and he was replaced by, you know, it's like Jimmy Snuka leaving, and here's CV Alfie. They just got another guy and threw him in there. It went a while, and again, it was kind of painful watching Shelton and Bobby. You know, I know sometimes sometimes they wobbled, they didn't even go down, but still, they're selling for guys. I'm not saying like MJF shouldn't sell if he's getting attacked by one of these guys. But Shelton and Bobby selling for Speedball was ridiculous.
And see, that's the thing, is that they're trying to, sell and register at a realistic level. But when the guys are fucking up the moves or the timing of the moves or trying to do shit that's just above them, don't do shit you don't know how to do. That, that would help out. But they're trying to help these guys as best they can, because you got to work to some extent with everybody, but they need some grown adult men that are serious wrestlers that people can buy as a threat in the ring to these guys, both in the ring and on the microphone. And they haven't got either, because all their baby faces are fighting amongst themselves and they're all a bunch of fucking pussies. What were we just saying, Brian, a minute ago about the other baby faces? Old Swerve and Osprey. They're fighting with each other. Osprey looks like shit. And now they got another big baby face, right? The old hangnail, Adam Page. He's the guy that burns people's house down when he's a heel, but as a baby face, he's just a feckless putz. Because while Osprey is getting himself beat to death, trying to get Swerve and Page to cooperate with each other in order to fight the evil boar horseman, Page is supposed to be doing an interview. They play his music, and here comes Claudio and old Wheeler dragging Page out of the entranceway with his hands tied behind his back and his mouth duct taped. And everyone's they're just kicking his shit out of him and dragging him to the ring. And they take him and roll him in the ring and beat him up a little more. And Dick the Boozer gets in the ring with the microphone, and his opening line is, "I'm terribly sorry about all this." And now, because in his fantasy in the movie that he's shooting, old Moxley thinks he's, the head terrorist or whatever. So he proceeds to speak calmly and boringly to Page, while Page looks like a fucking moron being held down by these two. And the fans are chanting, "Shut the fuck up."
Like Big Boy Caprice on Downers.
And he droned on forever. Did you understand what he was really getting at here? It's not like it's ever apparent.
Man, it's been a year now. I still have no idea what the fuck his problem is with anything.
We don't know.
No idea what's going on with
He wants them to be better, so he wants them to be tougher, but he wants to bring your best. Well, but meanwhile, I've got my guys beating the shit out of you and tying you up so I can say this. But there were no referees or officials in sight. When it's convenient for them, if two girls are about to get in a fucking slap fight, they'll run a dozen people out there to get in the way. But when one of their goddamn top stars is hogtied and fucking tied up and having the shit kicked out of it, it's just, don't go out there and do anything about this. It doesn't make any sense. It's schizophrenic. They're all over the place. Something gets broken up in an instant. Nobody helps anybody at all. If some people are trying to justify it, the announcers are saying, well, Page hasn't made a lot of friends in the locker room. What about the cops or the security or the referees? Do they have to be your friend? Fuck, get an ICE agent in there, for Christ's sake. They need some more people to bully and push around.
No one saw them dragging around this duct-taped man?
They had to drag him past the owner of the company. Tony Khan has established he sits at Gorilla. They had to drag him past the owner. Who did that? That's none of it. There's no consistency. There's no logic. So then, after Moxley finishes his promo, Page just leans up and headbutts him. And Moxley sells that, and his heels beat him up some more. And then music plays, and here comes Samoa Joe and Shapoopy and guess a Hobbs. I don't remember who else was there. And then the heels ran off. Well, why didn't you fucking play that song 5 minutes ago? What the fuck?
He ran from the song.
Where was Joe and all of those guys that they just, right when Page starts fighting back, the only offensive blow Page struck, well, now, hey, guys, come on out. It looks like we might be able to take him now. He's coming back. Before they were scared, they didn't want to. And then Paige screamed and drooled and ran after him.
Man, and we're still weeks away from that big event, so who knows what'll happen next week.
I don't know if I'd say who knows or who cares, but
should he light Moxley's house on fire? It's been established. I'm not saying it was a good idea, but now that it's been established that this man is a drunken arsonist.
But here's the thing, they could save money this time because they don't need to buy a house or shoot it. They just use that meme of a burning dumpster floating down a fucking river. Hey, look, I set Moxley's house on fire.
Maybe don't do that. That meme.
So then they gave us Megan Brain and Penelope Pitstop against Anna Jay and Ty Mello Jello. And then they gave us a VTR package because the big dream match.
You didn't watch that at all?
Oh, now you're not going to stop us and slow us down.
Oh, yes. That was good. That was a good match. It was good.
It's good.
It was good. It was a good match. And I mean, like, you know, Anna Jay just looks good. How do you not just stop and watch that for a little bit?
How many stars you think Uncle Dave gave it?
I don't know. How many tongue wags do I think he gave it? I don't know.
I don't think Dave tongue wags at girls like Anna Jay anymore. But then, where you just don't snicker over there. Gladiator.
It was a good match.
Then
it was a good match, Gladiator. And that's all I have to say about that.
You know, I don't like these young girls. I like back when the girl wrestlers knew how to hold their liquor by the ears. So then we had a package of Kenny and Oblada in Japan. You know, I must admit that it does look like our friend Olo Sleepy used to work harder in Japan than he does now. I will admit that. When was this footage from? The 90s?
No, this is from like what, 2016, 17, 18? Right before the start of AEW. I mean, it's the years leading up to the start of AEW.
Talk about time being hard on a son of a bitch. So this led up to the contract signing, and that's what everybody's been wanting to talk about. That's what the clip went out around on the internet. That's when they jumped the shark for this week. However else you want to lay this out. They're getting Oblada and Twinkle Toes in the ring together to sign the contract for their big dream match showdown at the stadium in Texas. That all of the AEW fans are just, oh my, this is going to be so great. Oh my gosh, it's them. And for the occasion, Brian, I might add, Tony Schiavone was in the ring as he calls these two out, and at least they were wearing suits of some description. They didn't just come out, you know, Oblada left his fishing outfit home, and Kenny didn't come out in fucking sweatpants. But Schiavone is there with the table in the ring, and it's because one of them is the international champion and the other one's the intercontinental champion or whatever. So now when they have this match, it's going to be for the new AEW Unified Championship, and they got a new belt made for the occasion. The other two belts are only like a year and a half old.
Well, plus, isn't Okada's belt tied to the Continental Tournament?
No, that ended when Kingston lost something to somebody.
But then Okada won the next year's tournament. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well, nevertheless, now, but with the AEW Unified Champion, what does Moxley have to say about that? He's the goddamn AEW World Champion. How can you have the two of the many secondary belts merged into a belt called the AEW Unified Belt when the fucking world champion doesn't have anything to goddamn say about it? What sense does any of this make? They're just making belts to give guys belts, to have matches for belts.
Do you think they should unify the Unified Championship and the World Championship once they get it out of the briefcase?
At some point.
A unified world championship?
Do you think that they're going to find out that Moxley lost the goddamn thing? It got confused somehow and forgot where he left it, and he came up with the briefcase angle just because he didn't want to tell him he lost the belt?
It would just be funny if it opened up like, hey, what's all that brown and gray powder? Where's the belt? Where's the belt, Moxley? After all this shit, what'd you do with the belt?
I traded it for the dream powder. But so back to Kenny and our friend Oblada, they both signed a contract, and Kenny speaks breathlessly about how great the match is going to be. And then suddenly here comes Don Fallis in the entranceway. And he and Kenny start going back and forth. And even when Don is saying some stuff that could be construed as serious, you can't take it as serious. And again, he's the overt comedy, rather the on-purpose comedy, the comedy you can see through. Rather than the other night, he took a cheap shot from ringside and had to stumble and fall down. But they do their back and forth, and then, you know, Kenny's like, I know all your tricks, and Don, well, you don't know this one. And guess who jumps Kenny from behind? The guy he's in the ring with that he's about to fight, Oblada, who jumps him from behind. And Brian, I don't know if by then your mind may have been wandering, but when Okada jumped on Kenny.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Did you look at the blows in quotation marks?
I knew you were going to go there. Yeah, the forearms.
He looked like a 9-year-old having a tantrum. They were in no way connecting with any force. It was like he was just crying like, wah! On Kenny's back. And they got the slowest paced, most boring heat ever, where they'd do something. Callis pulls out the police baton and it telescopes out. And they hit him a shot with it in the stomach. And he goes down, the diverticulitis. Okay. See, you hit him in the stomach, but now they're just walking around. And then they hit him in the head with it. Okay. And then within seconds, there's a doctor and there's referees and there's a stretcher. Again, the previous segment, they had a guy practically disemboweled and nobody came out. But now within seconds, this manager and one guy have hit this other guy twice. Here they come. And they're just putting him on a stretcher without even looking at him. Is he breathing? We don't know. Get him on a stretcher. That'll help. Because they got to do the spot. And then Okada jumps on the top rope and comes off with an elbow drop off the top rope on his stomach. Okay, and then more nothing happens while Chris Daniels gets in the ring and is arguing with Don and Okada while they're putting Kenny on his stretcher. And then, but finally, Oblada goes up and goes the top rope. Kenny's on the stretcher on the wheelie thing on the floor. And Okada comes off with an elbow drop off the top rope to Kenny's stomach while he's on the gurney. And Kenny proceeds to projectile vomit a fucking geyser of fake blood everywhere. And I mean, this wasn't like I'm going to bite the rubber and I'm going to bleed from the mouth. For one thing, they just use fake blood because they're unprofessional and they don't care. But for another thing, it wasn't even like I'm going to bleed from the mouth and cough up a little blood. It was like goddamn Saw 17. Brian, if this blood had allegedly been real and he regurgitated this much blood, would there be any possibility of saving this man's life?
Oh, no, he'd have to be at the hospital at a minimum. He may be dead. For that much. It was a lot, and it was just like he was gurgling it, and it was spitting out.
And when he was making the funny faces, the funny puffy faces that he makes in the ring when he's huffing and puffing and pointing and going to hit the ropes and do the Canterbury knee or whatever, He looked like Louis Armstrong trying to play the fucking trumpet. He was blowing on purpose in front of the camera so that it would go further. And then so they had given him a sip of like a pint of this shit. And it was so ridiculous. And then plus when it got on the white shirt, then you could tell the food coloring because it's not as dark as real blood. It was lighter, but no, there was no potential way this was in any way real. And we didn't read his obituary the next day. So now, if you're keeping track, they super kicked Will Ospreay, the one top babyface, in the face with thumbtack adorned tennis shoes, and they had to cover his face up because he wasn't bleeding, but they said he was, so they couldn't show it. But he's fucked up. Then they brought Page out with his hands tied behind his back, his mouth duct taped, and just kicked the shit out of him. Now they brought Kenny out and they killed him. They killed Kenny. You bastards. They just actually, what looked like murdered him and had him carried out by medical authorities. And the only one that didn't actually bleed or get carried out or both of the top four baby faces was Swerve. And he still got the shit kicked out of him, didn't he? I think, didn't he?
Yeah, he got super kicked in the face a bunch of times with the thumbtacks.
Yeah, before the thumbtacks. Yeah, he was handcuffed and chained to the wall like torture victim in Torquemada's Rampage. Boy, these baby faces, I'll tell you what, I want them on my side.
You see?
They get the job done.
This is why MJF was smart. This is why he knew he had to be aligned with the Hurt Syndicate. He's safe.
And then after they murdered Kenny, even though nobody was really chasing him, and the people that came out were just concerned about getting Kenny back to get him some attention, Don then grabs old Sleepy and says, "Let's get out of here. They're going to kill us." And they ran to the back and jumped in an SUV and sped off at a high rate of speed with nobody whatsoever chasing them.
Yeah, who was going to kill them?
They were scared.
Yeah, was it the fans or was it the personnel? Who was going to kill them exactly?
I don't know. The fans were going to kill them if they didn't leave pretty soon because the fans were pretty well sick of them. But I know there was no threat from any of the wrestling-oriented personnel in the building to do anything to them.
Well, the best part about it was in a classic AEW moment, just a throwback to the good old days of Awful. As they're running out of the building, come on, we got to go, they're going to kill us. Marvez runs out of nowhere.
Yes,
nowhere. Here's Marvez.
Yes.
We haven't seen him all show.
No. They're running. They're in the back of the building where the cars park, and it was still in the building, not in a parking lot, but they're in the back and they're running. And there's Marvez just standing there holding a microphone as they unplanned run by. And he's like, well, what in the world are you guys doing? And they said, we don't have time to talk to you now. And they ran off. So do they just stand him back there? And if anybody runs by, he said, talk to him.
He was ready to run out. It was one of the funnier moments, I think, of the whole show. That's what you want, funny moments in the middle of these segments. But again, they're putting over their heels as strong as possible. If we want to look on the bright side, at least it was one of those fold-out nightsticks, not a screwdriver. Maybe we've moved on from that level of ridiculousness. I don't know. Omega, geez, if there were any athletic commissions, they would watch this and go, there's no way I'm clearing this fucking guy. We'll see. Again, they put over, how many weeks away are we from All In?
That's July 12th, so we're a month away.
I mean, it's a lot of TV time.
Well, he's going to need a complete bowel fucking removal and replacement and all that other stuff. That takes time.
He should wear a bodysuit like Slim Goodbody. Show his organs.
He could point to him for the kids on the way out. Now, see, kids, here's where I got my pancreas replaced, and they had to remove the spleen and put it up next to my asshole.
Now, that was the official end of Dynamite. It rolled into Collision, but in terms of like that would have been the typical overrun, but that was the end of Dynamite.
Yes, that was an overreach of an overrun. That was the end of regulation, and we've got a couple more things to comment on. But Brian, I can't help but think that instead of the collapsible police baton, if instead the heels had taken something that's really tough and durable and hit Kenny in the stomach with it, like maybe a work boot from our new friends over at Brunt, and just kicked it with like the Marin work boot from Brunt, just kicked him right in the gut with it. Boy, howdy, he'd have gone down, he'd have never come up, because these boots, they're made to take a licking and keep on ticking. You love your Brunt work boots, don't you?
First of all, they're comfortable. Second of all, I feel like they make me taller. So those are two good things to start with. I feel like, oh man, I'm a good 6'2" now. But no, they're great. These are high quality. These are great. Suzanne saw them. She said, how come you didn't get me anything? I said, I have a promo code if you want to get yourself something. But these are really great boots. And I've become quickly a big fan of Brunt. Luckily, they sent a hat too. Because now I can advertise how much I like them. This is good stuff.
You, and of course, now you're not known for going out and slopping around in the mud and working at the yard. But down south on the plantation here, I've had a lot of trouble with boots, and this is for real. This is legitimate. It's not even a bit here. I had a pair of boots several years ago that I wore them to work out in the yard and a wheelbarrow and fucking dig and goddamn carry shit and brush and whatever. And I wore them until the goddamn sole came off of them. And I had to duct tape the sole back onto the boot. So I was walking around with one boot with duct tape around the toe of it and then when the duct tape would get wet and or fucking worn around, then I would trip because the sole would start flapping on the toe. You see what I'm saying there? Do you see what I'm saying there to you, boy? The toe was flapping on the sole.
You let your soul go.
I let my soul go. My soul was loose. Soul Patrol. So Stace got me another pair of boots, and they were a beautiful looking pair of boots, but I wore them one time out in the yard. And I goddamn wore a sore on my heel that took 2 weeks to heal. I couldn't wear any shoe. I couldn't hardly walk. And then I got the ones that I've had until just up here just lately. And they've been fine. They didn't hurt my feet. And they've got a non-slip sole. And they're good boots for the mud and everything. But over the springtime, you may have heard, Brian, that it's rained about 1.5 feet this year so far.
It's raining today
down here in Louisville.
Didn't you say it was raining today?
It poured rain here just a little while ago while we were doing this program. It's rained all the time. When the Monroes were out cleaning the creek out this spring and I was back there, the boots that I had, they're not waterproof. I was like, shit, my feet are cold. I looked down and my feet are soggy like I was barefoot in the creek from all the water down there. So the Marin work boot from our friends, did I mention at Brunt? That's Brunt, B-R-U-N-T, bruntworkwear.com. These things are badass. They're comfortable. They're like tennis shoes on your feet, but protection and durability. They're lightweight. They're waterproof. They're slip and oil resistant, heat resistant, electrical hazard rated. Brian, that means you can stand on your roof in a severe lightning storm. And if you get hit, it'll just fry the people in the house. It won't hurt you at all.
Well, again, I don't think, first of all, don't do that. Second of all, I don't think it means that. Third of all, let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about the realities. I like the fact that I now have something I can go out there and get dirty with the kids. I never want to get my flip-flops dirty. Now I got a good pair of boots.
Your flip-flop. Well, you'll lose 4 or 5 toes into some kind of work-related accident from people with shovels and pickaxes and everything.
Not anymore.
In flip-flops you would, but now you won't. And as a matter of fact, take a pickaxe to one of these son of a guns. Take the boot and put it on your neighbor's head and then try to hit them in the head with a pickaxe and see whether that boot stops it or not.
How about this? Let's make it something gentle, something that can't offend. Load your boot like the grappler. That's a good test. There you go. That's a test.
Tap the toe of the boot on the ground and then kick your neighbor in the head with it. And if he goes into a coma, you'll know.
No, again, no violence. No violence. No violence on this wrestling show, sir. No violence on this wrestling show.
Well, I'll tell you what, from oily workshop floors to muddy farm fields and everywhere in between, the Marin's 6-inch soft toe is built for workers across a variety of trades. But Brunt, folks, our new friends, and they're good friends. They're good, especially on a Ritz cracker. They're not just about work boots. They offer a full range of high-performance gear built for tough jobs, heavy-duty work pants to weather-resistant jackets. They design durable, reliable workwear to keep you protected and productive, or protective and productive. But you ain't going to get your feet hurt when you're out there working in these boots.
No.
And they have reinvented comfort for the hardest workers out there. Again, the hats, the clothes, they have doilies for all occasions. Well, and right now,
I don't know about that, but yes, right now.
But yes, you can, when you're working out at the job site and you're pumping out a septic tank, right next to the septic tank, you set one of these doilies down, you put your afternoon tea on it, and you can't live like a savage. For a limited time, folks, we don't know how long this is going to last. If I were you, I'd act quickly. Some good things go away after a period of time. But right now, you're going to get $10 off at Brunt by using the code JCE at checkout. Just go to Brunt. Again, BRUNT. They're going to bear the brunt of it. BruntWorkwear.com. Use the code JCE. $10 off. They let you try all their products on the job. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you there. But they're great boots, great hats. The bulletproof vests are good for any wrestling manager, but you can join over 500,000 other satisfied customers with comfortable, non-injured feet by going to bruntworkwear.com. Use the code JCE. You're going to be saving $10 on the best old boots that you're ever going to kick somebody's ass in.
No, they have another pair I actually want to get too. These are great. These are tremendous. Brunt. Don't Brunt. Use Brunt.
And waterproof.
Yeah.
And mud.
And that.
I'm telling you what, well, if you're pumping out a septic tank or something.
Why do you keep going there? How about dealing with a
Well, I only go there once every couple of years, but you got to do it once every couple of years. That shit builds up.
All right.
Anyhow,
once again, we can't end on that note. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Please support them. Great products. Brunt.
BruntWorkwear.com. Promo code JCE. $10 off. The best old boots in that you will ever have in your entire life. They've also, in addition to the Marin.
Oh no! Come on.
They've also got the Omen. No, OHMAN. It's pronounced Omen, and that's a good omen. They're also some of the best-selling work boots that they have.
That's right. That's a good omen. And with that,
yes,
we'll go from Brunt to Grunt back to AEW Dynamite. Yes, or actually AEW Collision, I guess.
Bearing the brunt of AEW television. Well, it's downhill from here, as we will see when we talk about the ratings in a minute, but they followed up the murder of Kenny Olivier with alas, poor Kenny, I knew him well, with a match between Kyle Felcher and Anthony Bowens. I didn't choose to watch that match. And then, did you enjoy seeing poor Carlos Cabrera? I haven't seen him in 30 years, but it looks like they caught him ready to go on a shopping trip to Costco and said, hey, you got to get in the ring.
He delivered his lines too so slowly, you thought he was being held hostage.
I know, it was like are we trying to read between the lines here? It was.
How do I say as much as I can without stopping WWE from hiring me?
But I know somebody's going to say, well, he's the Spanish announcer. English is a second language. That's why he was so halting and it was so awkward and it was just didn't come together. But he worked for the WWF doing a Spanish commentary 30 years ago. It's not like he's recently been introduced to fucking English. So whatever, he's there in his casual clothes, like they just said, hey, jump in the ring. And he beats around the bush and awkwardly introduces the living legend, Atlantis to a small smattering of applause. And then Atlantis and Atlantis Jr. come out, and they're both in Atlantis outfits, but Brian, you could tell. I don't know how old Atlantis is. I think the announcer said he was 62, but you could tell this was an elderly man wearing a lucha costume from the time he first walked out. Could you not?
But what a lovely and timeless costume it is. I actually think it's one of the better looking lucha costumes. More classic, themed, classy.
Yes. But he still looked like a fucking... I mean, you could imagine if he didn't have the mask and the outfit on, him wandering around the rehabilitation retirement home with the odd little old man movements. He doesn't still wrestle seriously, right? They were doing this as an angle.
I haven't heard, again, I don't follow lucha too closely right now. I have not heard of him wrestling.
Is he booked upcoming to wrestle FTR since they did this angle, or is it to... Well, here's what happened. Atlantis and Atlantis Jr. came out. They didn't get a chance to speak because FTR and Stokely came out. And I said, oh, fuck it. And I wasn't even half listening because it was a long promo, and they're healing the Mexican fellows, and Dax was, doing it where he asked the question and he's going to answer it again. And they finally end up getting in a fight. And it was all FTR could do to get the decrepit 62-year-old man down. I don't know if he ever actually went down. I don't know if he could get back up if he went down. He just kind of bent over and started hunching up a little bit while they were beating on him. But again, you've got FTR who, regardless of the way that they've been treated or presented recently, they're quality performers in the ring. There's some way that they could potentially be rehabilitated to some standing. And it's not even fighting luchadors that are the complete antithesis of their in-ring style and what makes them special. But it's goddamn ancient, antique luchadors that were, what was...
A living legend. Carlos Cabrera said, a living legend. You're bringing back a legend. For the record, he was born September 62. And... Okay,
then I am more... Right now, Brian, I'm more spry. I could throw a better punch and I could run faster than Atlantis Senior, who is 1 year my junior.
This is good. Are we setting up a match?
I ain't gonna work with him because I'd have to do all the work. So they start getting the man down, and Adam Cole runs in to make a save. But here comes Kyle Felcher and take a shit. And then here comes another masked guy. And then here comes Bandito. And then here comes Mystico. And now they're having a fight between people that wasn't even in this goddamn original issue. And then they play music, and Brody King comes in. Why did they have to play 10 seconds of Brody King's music when the other guys just ran out? And it was a big, awkward mess, but the focus of the thing was old Atlanta Senior, who could barely move and who looked like a baked potato wearing a lucha costume, beat Dax up and ran him off. And I use the word run in a very generous fashion. Out of the building. So what? Again, do we have to go to the senior citizen community now to find people that can beat up the top wrestlers on the roster here? And what is going on? FTR is going to have a match with a lucha team in Mexico. Wonderful. That doesn't mean that you make them look like complete fucking imbeciles and complete ineffective morons on the TV in America. If you can't find somebody, if there is nobody in lucha libre today that can get over as a star and be impressive, etc. You just don't book the fucking match. But now it's senior citizens that we're. Am I overstating Atlanta Senior?
Well, again, he is a legend, although not really in the States, unless you're one of the fans who watched Lucha from Arena Mexico in the States. But he is a Lucha legend. He's your age. FTR, I said it last time, they've lost a lot of luster. And they're going down this road here. At least the babyfaces kind of had one segment where they came out on top, I guess.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't even AEW babyfaces.
Well, that's true.
It was another company's babyfaces that don't appear here often and probably ain't going to appear here again after this Mexico show, beating up the standard AEW talent.
And a lot of segments on the show turn into the end of UWF on Fast Forward. Just people running out, just what is going on here? And then the show continues. That was the end of the show. Here it's just like, and there'll be more show after we clean up this mess.
Yes. Every segment ends in, it's breaking down in Tulsa. We'll be right back. So they came right back with Toni Storm, who came out to eat some more of Mercedes Moon's steak dinner that she had at ringside. But before that she could even get in the ring, out came Julia Hart and Blue Sky, and they beat up Toni Storm on the floor. And then the doctors came over to check on Toni, who'd been beaten up by her opponent and a henchman on the floor. And then they said, okay, she's all right. So they rang the bell, started the match. Oh, my God. Holy God, these fucking people. Tony's good about writing down angles that he's seen in the past. He's just not good about remembering that he's done them all 100 times. So Toni Storm wrestled Julia Hart. Mercedes was at ringside with her room service cart. Storm won. Mercedes got in the ring and beat Storm up. Mina Mellons came out and ran Mercedes off. But then, as Mina turned around to check on Storm, Mercedes got back in the ring and beat Mina up too, and then did her little stripper dance. And then went out to find some Pacific Northwest woods to get lost in. So, again, which angle are we supposed to remember from this 10-minute girls match? The one they did before the match? The one they did after the match? Who's mad at who here? Is it Julia Hart and Blue Sky that are mad at Storm? Or is it Mercedes that's mad at Storm? Now, I know Mina would be mad at Julia Hart and Blue Sky, but she's got to be mad at Mercedes too, because Mercedes beat her up. I'm just trying to keep this straight, Brian, so I know what the angles are.
You talked me into it. I believe everything you just said.
Okay. Well, then it's clear as day.
Mina held Toni Storm to her bosom. That was her save. She picked up her head and held it to her bosom.
We need to get a breast milk sponsor.
What?
We need to get a breast milk sponsor.
That wasn't a what? That wasn't like a repeat that what? That was like that's a crazy what?
Well, I was just thinking, who's the leader in the breast milk business these days?
I don't know.
Well, they should sign up, Mina and some of these girls for spokespeople. Well, and then we could run the spots and.
Well, hopefully, I don't know if they're just lactating, at will on the go.
Is commercial breast milk more expensive than regular old vitamin D milk that you get in, various places like the convenience store?
How do we move on from this? How do we? I
just didn't know whether there was I bet there's a lot of money in it. It's a specialized fucking product. I'd be happy to be one of the milkers.
Someone's playing. There's music. That means
moving on.
Moving right along.
I'm moving on. They had a mixed 6-man. I can't be one of the milkers. A mixed 6-man tag team extravaganza was up next with Minaj and Mansoor, the male models, and they teamed up with Taya Valkyrie against Willow Nightingale, Mark Briscoe, and Ishii. Poor Mark Briscoe. So they had that. Then Bandito had a nice little match with our friend Frank Mortis.
You know what? To what you said earlier, how like there's so many of these luchadors, especially right now. This is like what they would do with Japanese wrestlers going into the big Forbidden Door show every year, but now it's Grand Slam International. And since it's in Mexico, it's nonstop luchadors on the show. So many of them are interchangeable. Bandito does have something a little different.
Yeah.
A little bit of size, charisma, even though he's wearing a mask. He is a little different than a lot of these, the Commanders, the Gravities, the Hypertension. I don't know.
Hologram. Hypertension and Hologram were a good team. I remember. Except Hypertension he gets so red in the face. The finish of this match was just spectacular. The silly wrestling fans applauded it. Now, old Rigor Mortis is, besides he's wearing the bull costume, he's a big guy. He's heavy, right? He's a hefty fellow. And Bandito's not bad. He's a strong fellow. He's got a good upper body. So they decide to both climb up to the top rope and fight, in quotation marks, on the top rope. And the finish of the match was them helping each other. First one foot, then the other foot, then they're holding on to each other, the other guy, so that they can stand up on the top rope, so that then Bandito can reach under and pick Mortis up with in a scoop slam position, and Mortis can stand there balancing carefully, and as soon as the scoop happens, he can go right up with him, because they don't want to make any mistake, because they're going to fall off and break both their necks. And then Bandito turns around and gives him a backwards power slam off the fucking top rope. The move itself, once that it actually went into motion, was a hell of a bump. And it should have been the finish. And old Bandito barely turned her over before he would have landed on his head. So that part I don't have the problem with. It's the 30 to 40 seconds beforehand where they helped each other climb up on the top turnbuckle and balance there precariously in order to cooperate with each other and pulling that fucking move off. That's what I have the problem with. And that's why, again, the audience for AEW and maybe the modern audience, they just want, as we said on the last show with Mr. Iguana, they just want silly fucking wrestling. And they applauded that bogus, phony fucking move because everybody landed hard, not jeering like, holy fucking shit, like any other fan for the previous 100 years would have, because it was so laughable that they helped each other do it to begin with. I just thought I'd point that out. And I know that you enjoyed the match between Thekla and Queen Waiata.
You know what? It wasn't always built up to be. I heard that. I didn't see it. By this point, I was done. I fell asleep. This was so much stuff. And again, once it hits Collision, I have no obligation to watch any of this. But I heard for Thekla's debut, Queen Aminata, the way it was being presented to me, was stiff with her, wasn't cooperative with her, no sold the finish, and immediately got up and stormed off, what someone said. So I had to see it. And this match was certainly, other than the pin, or other than the submission, other than the finish, this match was great at getting Queen Aminata over as an ass kicker.
Yeah.
She's got size, she's tall. But that wasn't, I think, what this was supposed to be. I don't know what this was.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't watch closely for any ill will. I just thought they were going to have a fucking crummy match. But what it was I don't know if there was ill feeling or if maybe Thekla's one of these generous types that even though she's just started on the show and she has a gimmick and they're apparently trying to push her, she's going to just let the queen just look like $1 million because old Waiata just beat the shit out of Thekla from the start of the match pretty much to the finish. You didn't see a lot of the Thekla stuff, and she didn't do any of her shit really that gets over. She did the back bend at one point, and then after she got her ass handed to her for about 10 minutes or so, she got the submission hold on Queen Waiata and won the match. But I didn't pay any attention for what did she look like? She was perturbed when she rolled out and stalked off after the match.
See, that's
Brian,
the thing. I didn't notice anything, but then someone sent someone sent, because it goes around, and then they're like, hey, did you see this? It was a video, and it was like all the way zoomed in. So you see like the bottom rope in her head. And it's like, look at how mad she is. I mean, she lost the match.
Well, it could be some of these people also, they leave the ring looking pissed off because they realize already that their performance was substandard. Like the other day when Bobby Lashley tried to spinebuster that fucking guy 15 no, it was Hobbs. It was Hobbs. I'm sorry. Hobbs tried to spinebuster the guy 3 or 4 times. The guy kept jumping away from him. Hobbs didn't look too fucking happy. But nevertheless, that was that. And then the main event of Collision, we are 4 hours in now, was an 8-man tag team match because we haven't had enough multiple person matches. After the 30-minute draw in a singles match, the job match with Mystico, the 6-man with the Hurts and the Squirts, the 6-person mixed contest, the goddamn endless run-ins, the contract signing that led to a murder. Now we get Cole O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, and Danny Garcia with Daddy Mac in the corner against Josh Alexander, Lance Archer, Take a Shit, and Chia with Rocky and Trent in the corner. And that match, ladies and gentlemen, ran over. Again, second week in a row, they've got 4 fucking hours. They're losing viewers like a goddamn carotid artery patient is losing blood, and they still have to run it over. And that was Wednesday night. You see why I would rather be in the business of the old days when you could live in a nice place and you could work close to home and you could make a lot of money, all things considered, and you didn't have to deal with shit like this.
Well, again, they're making nice money now.
Yeah, but they got to deal with shit like this.
Well, some of them may not realize it's shit. Not everyone's shit is someone else's shit. Sometimes you think your own shit smells good.
Yeah, sometimes it's shit and sometimes it's shinola.
All right, well, that was AEW Collision, and that was the end of the night for AEW Summer Blockbuster. Was it Blockbuster or Spectacular?
I don't know, Summer Spectacular thing. I'm just waiting. Brian, you got any shinola in your house? We ought to start advertising shinola also. Gets a bad rap. It's always paired with shit.
Again, one of those expressions that... Well, go ahead, yes.
I was just going to say, but speaking of not knowing shit from shinola, before we talk about the ratings for this program, where it'll sound more like shit than shinola, what's going on at the Arcadian Vanguard Network? Their organ meister?
All right, getting you in a good mood with the organ music. Let's do this quickly. We've been doing this for a while, and AEW took the life out of me a second time this week just talking about it. Go through everything, listen to everything, do what you gotta do, be who you need to be. ArcadianVanguard.com, wherever you find your favorite podcast. On Facebook, Facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. And of course, on Twitter at, where are we? At Superpodcast. That's where we are. Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon. This week, a look at the NWF, Johnny Powers, and all that. With the NWF. Go through listen to the show today. SUAWpod.com or look for Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon wherever you find your favorite podcast. Don't forget about the wrestling news each and every day. Get your wrestling news for free. Get it directly from the Wrestling News at thewrestlingnews.com, wherever you find your favorite podcast. No clickbait, no paywall, just the Wrestling News. Let's mention 40 years ago, what was happening in wrestling. Hear about it today on Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, McAdamPod.com, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts on the 605 Superpodcast, the Mothership! That's not an official sound there, Jim. But go through the archive today, 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Mothership.
I got a bootleg cha-ching. All right, let's close up by figuring out who and how many and why did they watch that program this past Wednesday night.
Well, we have the ratings here. There's a lot to open because it's two different shows, technically. AEW Dynamite, June 11th, 2025, 8 to 10:01 p.m., according to WrestleNomics. On average, watched by 597,000 viewers.
Ouch, they're back below 600,000 for their big summer blockbuster. That just breaks my heart.
And we'll just say it here too, AEW Collision, same night, same place, same Tony place, same Tony channel, from 10:01 to 12:04 a.m., 397,000 viewers on average.
Jeez, actually, that may be a little better than last week. So they did better. They did worse at the beginning, but better at the end. How's this all going to play out, Brian? Let's whip through these.
It's another one of those weeks. A lot of quarter hours here. These were compiled by WrestleNomics, quarter 1, 8 to 8:15 p.m. The Adam Page, Christopher Daniels backstage segment with the Death Riders backstage 2, and the start of Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay. 672,000 viewers.
Ouch. Okay. They started out in the 800,000s again last week, and then, of course, plummeted precipitously, but now they're back to much of their core audience at the start. So I predict Dynamite ain't going to drop as badly as it normally does, but then the gates are going to open with Collision. Go ahead.
Yes, the gates of agony, so to speak.
Yes.
Quarter 2, 8:15, 8:30 p.m. The continuation of Swerve versus Ospreay with picture-in-picture twice. 618,000 viewers.
And there you go. They lost 54,000, but normally it's a six-figure loss because they didn't start high and they've got their main event on early, so they're trying to keep them. These are the faithful.
Well, let's see how high they can go. We go to quarter 3, 8:30 to 8:45 p.m. The continuation again of Swerve versus Ospreay. The post-match with the Death Riders, the Young Bucks, Prince Nana, and then this is a separate segment. The Kazuchika Okada Don Callis backstage angle. 662,000 viewers.
So do you think that they came back when they heard that the first match was still going, or just this is the fluctuation?
I don't know how that works. Do people just keep checking back in? Is the match over yet? Who knows? But let's see what the rest of the story tells us. Quarter 4, 8:45 to 9 p.m. An ad break. The Hurt Syndicate Commander backstage angle. Mystico versus Blake Christian. Mystico and the Hurt Syndicate. And Jet Speed Mascara Dorado live angle, as it says here. 573,000 viewers.
Ouch. So now they're officially down 100,000 from the start, which that ain't normally bad. It's kind of average, except that they started low. So they're already down below 6 at the end of the first hour.
Well, we go to the big 9 o'clock hour, quarter 5, 9 to 9:15 p.m. Again, as it says it here, the continuation of Jet Speed and Mascara Dorada, Speedball Bailey, Kevin Knight, and Mascara Dorada, that is, versus the Hurt Syndicate with picture-in-picture, 602,000 viewers.
Okay, so they picked up 29,000 at the top of the hour. They are still remarkably consistent for an AEW program in that they're they're staying in the same 100,000 range for the first hour and 15 minutes. That's very unusual.
Well, we go to quarter 6, 9:15 and 9:30 p.m. An ad break, the Adam Page Death Riders Ops Live Angle, and an ad break, 563,000 viewers.
And back down to, that's their lowest point at this juncture, but they're still only down 110,000 from the start.
We go now to quarter 7, 9:45 to 10 p.m. Oh, no, excuse me. 9:30 to, where are we? 9:30 to 9:45.
No, we're at quarter 7.
Quarter 7, 9:30 to 9:45. I messed up.
No, yes, you're right. Quarter 7, 9:30 to 9:45. That's what I'm saying.
Megan Bain and Penelope Ford versus, as it says here, KJ with picture-in-picture ads. The Kazuchika Okada Kenny Omega video. 571,000 viewers.
So about 8,000 up from quarter 6, about the same. They're holding in there.
Anna J. We go now to quarter 8, 9:45 to 10 p.m. Overrun in a sense. Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega video continued. An ad break. And the beginning and middle of the Okada Omega Don Callis live angle, 517,000 viewers.
Jesus Christ. So Kenny, where did the viewers go?
Low point in the key demo, 184, down from 217 the quarter before that, so a big hit there.
Well, there's a low point for everything in the whole show, from 672 at the start to 517. It was a low point, not only viewership-wise, key demo, but artistically as well.
We go down to quarter 9, the start of Collision, but the finish of Okada and Callis and Kenny's live angle, this is 10 to 10:15 p.m., the Adam Cole entrance, and the start of Anthony Bowens versus Kyle Fletcher with picture-in-picture, 498,000 viewers.
Okay, so now they're under 500,000, and their second program is going to average under 4, so here they go.
Quarter 10, 10:15 to 10:30 p.m., Bowens versus Fletcher continued. The post-match with Lance Archer, Adam Cole, the Carlos Cabrera, Atlantis Jr., FTR, Stokely Hathaway, Adam Cole live angle, 445,000 viewers.
Jesus, now we're seeing attrition take hold. They're getting the fuck out of there.
We go now to quarter 11, 10:30 to 10:45 p.m. Continuation of the Atlantis family and Adam Cole and FTR and Callis. Was Callis involved in that? It says here, Don Callis family, Hechicero, Bandito, Templario. Oh yeah, went into that match, a Brody King live angle. And then Big Bill and Brian Keith and the Workhorseman backstage angle. And Mercedes Monet's entrance into the start of Tony Storm versus Julia Hart.
Jesus.
It's a lot going on there. Picture-in-picture. 501,000 viewers.
Wait a minute, they popped up to 501,000 out of nowhere for all that. Gained 56,000 viewers back. That's an anomaly.
Well, we go now to quarter 12, 10:45 to 11 p.m. Continuation of Tony versus Julia, the post-match with Mercedes, the Ricochet, Blake Christian, Lee Johnson backstage angle, an ad break, Mark Briscoe and Tomohiro Ishii and Willow Nightingale versus the M&M Collection and Taya Valkyrie, 440,000 viewers.
And they're headed back down, and that's the low point of the night so far.
We go to quarter 13, the big 11 o'clock hour. The continuation of Briscoe and Ishii and Willow versus M&M and Taya. The Chris Statlander, Wheeler Yuta, Marina Shafir backstage angle, whatever that was. And the start of the Beast Mortos versus Bandito, a picture-in-picture, 384,000 viewers.
Ouch. All right.
Let's keep this rolling. We go to the next quarter, 11:15 to 11:30 p.m. Continuation of Mortos versus Bandito. Monet and Zeuxis? What? Zeuxis. Mercedes Monet and Zeuxis backstage angle. I don't know what that is.
I don't know.
An ad break. The Hangman Page, Young Bucks, Nana, Swerve backstage angle. And the start of Tekla. I was about to say Thekla. Tekla versus Queen Aminata. 363,000 viewers. 11:30 to 11:45. Continuation of Aminata versus Tekla. Picture-in-picture. Nick Wayne and Kip Sabian backstage angle and an ad break. 3:32. 11:45 to 12 p.m. Recap of Hechicero and Don Callis family versus Daniel Garcia and Paragon. With picture-in-picture. 269. And then 5-minute overrun into the big midnight hour. Hechichero's whole thing continued. 254. 89,000 in the key demo.
So again, in 4 hours, they went from 672,000 to 254,000. That's a loss of 418,000 viewers.
One day something will gain. Just wait.
One day my gains will come.
Heard by many wrestlers, actually, that song.
Yes. They better hope it's capital gains, because I don't think they're going to gain any audience with television programs like that. But
All right.
anyhow,
it's your show.
Well, we're going to be doing some other things next week. Well, first of all, we're back on the drive-through here in the coming few days, and we'll have all kinds of updates and information and questions and everything. And then next week, more of this on the experience. And we're going to start into, hopefully, if we get the opportunity, we went through the AEW roster and picked a few out. Hopefully, we're going to start with the WWE roster and see how we could pare that down to something acceptable. And then over the next few weeks, we're going to start polishing these things and see if you could come up with an acceptable talent roster with either of these bloated rosters that they've got. So that'll be fun to look forward to, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really do want to hear you go through the WWE roster. That'll be interesting.
Well, and in the meantime, if something else happens, we'll be here to talk about it. Just stay tuned. We never go too far away, folks, so how can you miss us? And in parting, besides love, peace, and soul, how about thank you, fuck you, and bye-bye, everybody?